at the Ballroom.
Written by Ayles and published by Starfall Publications. Bells of the Ball series book. Available on Amazon and free with Kindle Unlimited. Enjoy.
Chapter 1. Martha knew that the children loved nothing more than to be outside together, and she enjoyed providing them with any excuse to make that happen. Her charge was 10-year-old Master Oscar Wald, son of the Duke of Cornwall, Lord Spencer Wald. She'd been his governess for almost 6 years, so she knew the noble family very well. Martha knew that the children loved nothing more than to be outside together, and she enjoyed providing them with any excuse to make that happen. Her charge was 10-year-old Master Oscar Wald, son of the Duke of Cornwall, Lord Spencer Wald. She'd been his governess for almost 6 years, so she knew the noble family very well. Martha Rose had been orphaned from a similar age that her charges were now. Her wealthy merchant father had died of malaria, and her mother not long afterward, no doubt of a broken heart. She'd been raised by an elderly aunt on her mother's side who'd been strict but kind. As she grew older, she decided to become a governess. Her Aunt Matilda had known the Duke's wife's mother, and that was how she'd gained her position at Welwick Hall. At the age of 19, she joined the Wald household, and a year later her Aunt Matilda passed away, leaving her all alone in the world. Except she never felt alone, because the Wald family had allowed her to immerse herself into their daily lives, and she'd been with them ever since. When she joined the family, she'd learned that when Lady Sarah Wald was with child, so was the household cook's daughter, Josephine Atkins. Master Oscar, the Duke's son, was born first, on the evening of a lovely summer's day. Barely a month later, the cook's daughter gave birth to twins, a son, Silas, and a daughter, Vera. Lady Sarah had insisted that they grew up and play together as toddlers, much against the Duke's liking. As they became older, the Duke agreed to the overseeing of the twins' education, but he'd also insisted that the children no longer play together. If ever he caught them together, the punishment for the twins always led to days of hard labour, usually in the stinking stables. One of their favourite joint lessons was English literature, and Martha enjoyed the sessions almost as much. "Today I thought we could start reading another William Shakespeare play," Martha told the children. They were all seated underneath a huge willow tree, enjoying the outdoors but also staying in the shade. "Is it the 12th night?" Vera asked, her soft brown eyes twinkling with excitement at the thought of reading her favourite play. "Not today, Vera," Martha answered with a chuckle. "I know you love that play, but it is time to move on to another one." "But, Miss Martha, that is my favourite," Vera complained, her dark curly hair bobbing as she shook her head. "Yes, I know, Vera," Martha smiled patiently. "All I would ask of you is that we at least take a look at the opening scene from a different play. This one is titled Much Ado About Nothing." Martha pushed the girl to consider other options, because she wanted them to learn many of the famous playwrights' works. It was always her hope to extend the education of the servants' children, because to her they deserved a chance to improve their lives. "You will soon learn that it is equally as interesting as the 12th night. Now then, get yourselves comfortable as I will play the Duke Leonato. You will each read out a line of The Messenger, starting with Master Oscar and Vera in the middle, finishing with Silas. Are you ready, children?" Each of the children shuffled in their seated positions, staring down at their copies of open books on their knees. As promised, Martha read the first line of her character, putting drama into her tone as she play-acted her role. "I learn in this letter that Don Pedro of Aragon comes this night to Messina." "Is that my cue?" Master Oscar asked as Martha raised her hand to him, and when she nodded, he read the first line spoken by the messenger. "He is very near by this. He was not 3 leagues off when I left him." "Nicely read, Master Oscar," Martha praised. "Can you remember what a league is, Master Oscar?" Martha asked, adding some education to the session. "How far a person can walk in an hour?" Master Oscar asked questioningly, not certain of his explanation. "Very good, and 3 leagues would be around 9 miles, I should think, for a grown man," Martha explained. "And now, Vera, you are next to follow me. How many gentlemen have you lost in this action?" Vera wasted no time with her line. "But few of any sort and none of name," she quoted. "I want to ask what action you meant in your line, Miss Martha. What is it that has happened?" Ever the inquisitive little Vera, Martha smiled. The action refers to a military campaign. The messenger's reply meant that few of rank or reputation had been lost. It refers only to the gentleman. Are you ready for your line, Silas? Do I have to join in? Silas complained. I hate these plays. They're for the likes of my sister, not me. Very well, I can see that you all tire. Instead, you will write the lines up until the entrance of the character called Beatrice. Put them in your English literature books, Martha instructed. And that means you too, Silas. Miss Martha, what I cannot understand is that Father allows me to be with the twins when we are being schooled, but not when we are playing. Why is that? Master Oscar asked, looking puzzled as if he'd been churning over the question for some time. Rest assured, Master Oscar, I do all I can to make sure that you are together for as much as possible, Martha promised him. But we must abide by His Grace's rules. The twins must do their share of work for their mother in the kitchens. She watched as young Master Oscar mulled over her answer, his fresh face looking twisted. We have to help Mother, Master Oscar, or she will miss us, Vera tagged on, seeing that her friend struggled with the answer his governess had provided. Mother says that we are very privileged to be receiving any education at all, and it is only through the generosity of His Grace that this happens. Yes, and I hate it when you make me run off with you and Master Oscar when we're not allowed, Silas said, determined to have his say too. Shh! Be quiet, brother. Vera hushed him, giving him a little push with her hand. Stop telling tales. Don't you push me, sister, or I'll push you back, Silas warned, pinching his sister's arm. Now then, children, please stop this nonsense. Martha raised her voice. Allow me to explain, though you all know already because we seem to discuss this topic regularly. But I do not have to agree with it. I cannot believe that Father is so stupid, Master Oscar snarled, as he found his father's strict rules too much at times. Be careful what you say, Master Oscar. The twins were born within the servants' quarters, Martha said. But they are the children of Cook, who is a very respected servant. Even Father agrees with that, Master Oscar argued. Yes, as was her mother before her. Their family has worked at Welwick Hall for many generations. But you are born of nobility, Master Oscar. You must start to accept these differences, Martha tried, knowing that Master Oscar never liked her explanation. As far as he was concerned, his friends, the twins, were his equals. You should not risk sneaking off together, any of you, Martha reproached. But I miss them, and it is such a stupid rule, Master Oscar complained. Why can I not choose my own friends? Mother says I should. Yes, I can see how it confuses you, Master Oscar, but know that the Duke has the final say in everything. He is the lord of the estate. Martha tried another tactic, but she doubted that would work either. I hate it, Master Oscar barked. I want to be with my friends. I know you do, and I help all I can, Martha reminded him. We will finish off today with a nature walk around the gardens, she added, standing up. Straightening out her dress, Master Oscar and Vera got up too, but Silas refused. What is it, Silas? Do you not wish to have a turn around the garden? Martha asked the worried-looking boy. It always amazed her how much Silas and Vera looked so alike. Though Vera was petite in comparison to her gangly brother, their features were very similar. One might even say they were almost identical at this age. We have work to do with Mother, so we can't stay much longer, Silas explained. Mother expects us to clean the household shoes this afternoon. If we don't go soon, we'll be cleaning them in the dark. I know, Silas, but another 15 minutes will not hurt, Martha tried. Like Master Oscar, she too wished that the twins didn't have to leave him every day. But the Duke insisted that they only mingle in the classroom. She could not go beyond her employer's instructions, but she knew how important the twins were to her charge. Can I collect some flower heads for pressing? Vera asked, keen to get moving. Come on, Silas, or I'll run out of time. Master Oscar grabbed Vera's hand innocently and pulled her into a run. Meanwhile, Martha waited for Silas to catch up and join in. He ran on to catch them, forgetting the rules for a few more moments, and enjoying the extra play that Martha was giving them. She did all she could to get the twins out of their duties, but there was only so much she could do, most especially when the butler was around. He was as strict as the Duke when it came to keeping the children apart. Sighing, she gathered the bottom of her long dress and moved on, following in the direction of the children. "I want you to listen out for a woodpecker," she called after them, adding education to whatever they did together. Should the Duke see them through the windows, he would know they were all in class together. He never seemed to object if she accompanied them on walks together. "And let us look out for the bluebells," she called over to Vera. "They will make impressive pressings." "I like dandelions too," Vera said. "I love the bright yellow. It reminds me of the sunshine." "Very well, you can gather dandelions, and Master Oscar, you can look for bluebells." Martha gave out her instructions. "Silas, you can—" "I'm not picking flowers, that's for girls," Silas huffed. "Well, I do not mind," Master Oscar called back to his friend. "Not if Vera likes them." Master Oscar's comment caused Martha to smile. She was sure that the young master had a childish crush on little Vera. Although it was endearing, she hoped he would grow out of it soon. Their lives were destined to go in completely different directions. They were children of servants, and he was a child of nobility, which was not equal in status. One day, in the not-too-distant future, they would be prized apart by social rules. Poor Master Oscar would be devastated when it happened. For her part, she would help them all she could as children, but there were not many more years left before they would all become young adults. Each then would play their part in a society that taught strict rules of class distinctions, as she knew her own place well, all too well. Her employment at Welwick Hall would no doubt be ending soon. Normally a boy had a male teacher from around 5 years old, yet she'd been kept on. It was most likely Lady Sarah's doing. She was a gentle soul who only cared about her son's happiness. One day, though, she would need to move on elsewhere as a governess to new children, and she dreaded the day. They strolled along a circular route of the gardens close to the house. Vera skipped merrily as she picked flowers, putting them close to her nose to smell their sweet scent. Master Oscar followed her around, ever her protector. Not that Silas didn't protect his sister, because he did, but of the 3 children he was ever the nervous one, the one who worried over caught together without an adult accompanying them. Martha supposed it was his brotherly instinct kicking in. He hated to see his sister having to work hard, and often he took on much of her share of any punishment. As they completed the circle, they arrived back at the house. Martha turned onto a path that would take them to the kitchens. Once there, she dropped off the twins to go and do the laborious tasks set for them as servants' children. Martha waved goodbye along with Master Oscar. "I hate when they have to leave me," Master Oscar told her. "I know you do, Master Oscar, but you will see them tomorrow," she assured him. "I hate it even more that Vera has to do such hard work," he added. "I'm going to ask Father if I can help with her share of chores." "No, no, Master Oscar, you cannot do that," Martha warned. "You will only get poor little Vera into bother. And her mother too." "Why? I do not understand how Father can complain, not if the work still gets done," Master Oscar pleaded, his little eyes screwed up in confusion. "One day, Master Oscar, you will understand better the ways of the world," Martha said. "Enjoy your time together for now. Perhaps you could consider teaching the twins to ride a horse. That would be a useful skill for them to gain, one that your father might even agree to." "Yes, I like the sound of that, Miss Martha," Master Oscar said, cheering up. "I will ask and tell him that it is useful for servants to be able to ride." "I would not go that far, although it might be useful for Silas if he is thinking of joining the stables," she advised. "I can ask him in the classroom tomorrow," Master Oscar said, looking thoughtful. "I will ask them both, for I would enjoy teaching Vera too." "I will keep my fingers crossed that your father agrees," Martha said, laughing as she ruffled Master Oscar's head of dark hair. "Can you ride, Miss Martha?" the child asked. "As it happens, I can," Martha replied, pleased that Master Oscar was sounding more positive. "I had an aunt who encouraged me to be independent, and I had many teachers to learn many skills. That is why I was able to become a governess." "I am so pleased that you are my governess, Miss Martha," Master Oscar declared. "You are the prettiest governess I have ever seen, and I have met others when I have visited Mother's friends." "Why, that is most kind of you, young sir," Martha said, play-acting and taking a large curtsy to her young master. "I am not too proud to accept a nice compliment when I am given one, though I happen to know that you will be growing into a very handsome young man soon enough." "Do you think that I will be handsome?" Master Oscar queried. "And will Silas be handsome too? I know that Vera will be as beautiful as you when she grows up." "Indeed I do. You will be a handsome pair of young fellows, and Vera will make a wonderful wife to some kindly man," Martha said. "Vera is to marry me. I've already decided upon that," Master Oscar said with confidence. Martha had no answer and remained quiet as they walked back to the classroom. The young master was going to be in for a mighty disappointment, but then he would soon find some pretty young lady of his own standing in life. Chapter 2. "You sent for me, Your Grace," Martha said as she opened the study door after knocking. "Ah, yes, Miss Rose, do come in a moment," Lord Wald instructed. "Leave the door open. What I have to say will not take long." Martha hated being called to speak with the Duke because she always worried he might be dismissing her. The fact that she brought the children together at every opportunity, contrary to his liking, could be reason enough. "I have a distant cousin who will be visiting us for a short while," Lord Wald informed her. "I tell you this because I would like Oscar to dine with us this evening and meet with Mr. Harry Wald. My cousin is a very pleasant fellow, and we have not taken dinner with the boy in a while. That does, of course, mean that you will join us and sit by Oscar. Make sure he behaves and all that, yes?" Martha nodded her head in acknowledgement. "Yes, Your Grace. Master Oscar will be on his best behaviour. Rest assured." "Very well. I am quite fond of young Harry. That is why I wish to make it a family affair at dinner. He may even want to tutor the boy while he is here. I am sure that he will liaise with you to fit in some lessons," Lord Wald added. "That is all, Miss Rose. You may leave now and close the door behind you." Giving a small curtsy, Martha left the study and made her way to the classroom, where she knew that Master Oscar was studying Latin. What can he mean? That Mr. Harry Wald will be teaching Master Oscar? She wondered as she made her way up the stairway. She knew that the family might decide it was time for a man to take over Master Oscar's education. It had surprised her that it hadn't happened yet. As they had no daughters, there would be no place for her, and no reason to stay. "I do not suppose I can complain," she mumbled. "Master Oscar needs to be learning subjects such as sports, which I am unqualified to teach." "What was that you said, Miss Martha?" Master Oscar asked as she entered the classroom. "You have a nice surprise later today, young Master Oscar," she said, smiling and putting her personal worries behind her. "Mr. Harry Wald is to come and stay at Welwick Hall, and we are to dine with your family this evening to greet him." "Is he a relative of mine, Miss Martha?" Master Oscar asked, putting down his Latin book. "He is a distant cousin of your father's, but I cannot say how distant," Martha told him. "It must be on father's side, I suppose, if he shares the same name, am I not right?" Master Oscar asked, looking a little puzzled. "Very good, you are quite correct," Martha praised him. "Would you like some time to go and have a good wash so that you can look your smartest for your cousin?" "But why? I only had a bath a week ago," Master Oscar complained. "I would like you to wash your feet. You have been out in the garden and your shoes are muddy. Then wash your hands and face," Martha insisted. "Ask your valet to choose a formal outfit for the dinner table." And so young Master Oscar went off to ready himself for their very important guest. Martha, meanwhile, went to her room and readied herself too. If this was to be her replacement teacher, she wanted to hold her head up high. Dinner began at 7 as Mr. Harry Wald hadn't arrived until 6 that evening. He was the last to arrive in the dining room, and everyone else was already seated around the table. "My apologies for my lateness," Harry Wald said as he took the seat offered him by the side of the Duke. Glancing down the table, Martha caught his eye, and she liked what she saw. How could she be hostile towards him when he was so handsome? She had glanced into his hazel eyes and saw mischief. At the same time, her stomach lurched with anticipation. He showed a full set of pearly white teeth as he smiled down the table at everyone. "And you must be Master Oscar?" he questioned, smiling at the boy. "I am, sir. Shall I call you Mr. Wald?" Master Oscar asked with open honesty of a child. "No, young man, I would like you to call me Harry," the charming man replied, giving the boy a one-eyes wink. "Mr. Harry it will be," Master Oscar replied, pleased for the attention. "Very well," Harry replied. "We'll settle for Mr. Harry then," he smiled. "This is Miss Martha, my governess," Master Oscar said. never one to shy away from conversation. At the sound of her name, she gazed at the newcomer wistfully. It was almost a relief that she wasn't expected to speak, because she was sure the lump in her throat would prevent it. Martha always dreaded eating with the Duke. Most of the time he would never allow Master Oscar to speak, and it could be a stressful affair for her as she attempted to keep him quiet. But this time seemed different. The Duke was allowing his only son to converse with their relative, who he'd never met before. She thought it could only confirm her fears. The handsome man before her was here to take over the boy's education, and she was on her way out. Following dinner, Master Oscar was taken by his valet to be readied for bed. Martha decided that a spell in the library was needed to help her relax her and stop worrying over the charming visitor. She would go through some lesson planning to take her mind away from the fact that she was to be replaced by a handsome fellow called Mr. Harry. Within an hour or so, Martha had her books spread out on a reading table, along with an oil lamp that provided better light than a candle. Taking down notes, she heard the door squeak open, and in walked Mr. Harry. Her cheeks watered at the very thought of being alone with him, but she pushed aside the nauseous sensation because Nor did not want him to leave. "I am sorry, I will come back later," he said to her, with a charming half-smile that created a dimple in his cheek. "No, Mr. Wald, do come in," she called back, thinking that if she could get talking to him, she might find out if her suspicions were true. That was if she could hold her nerve together, because she felt her body trembling with apprehension. "Are you sure? I only mean that you are alone and—" "I'm not a lady of the ton, Mr. Wald," she expressed. "You will not disgrace me by being alone with me. For most of the time, I am invisible anyway." "I cannot believe that," he said with dismay in his tone, leaving the library door ajar. "A woman as resplendent as you could never be invisible." "A governess always lives a life set in the in-between world," she explained, pretending not to notice the pleasant compliment. "I cannot eat with the servants, and I cannot eat with the family, so most of the time I am alone." He nodded his head slightly, as if he was only just seeing her point. "Well, if you don't mind, I would very much welcome your company. I need to look through the Duke's collection of books," Mr. Harry explained, as he went to unlock a bookcase that Martha didn't have access to. "I am here to look through his rare collections and see if he has what I am looking for." "You are a book collector?" she asked in surprise. "Indeed, I am a collector of antiquities, rare books being among them," he said, taking a book from the glass cupboard. "That sounds fascinating," Martha said, watching him read the spines of the old books, as her own spine tingled at his very presence. She went to stand up and approach him so that she could look at the particular book he seemed to take an interest in. "I collect mainly codex manuscripts prior to the Middle Ages," he said, sounding well-informed as he peered through a one-eyed looking glass. "Imagine my surprise when I heard that the Duke has a collection of philosophical books by Greek and Roman authors. I had to come along and have a look at them." "I too love books, but mainly the more recent ones," she chuckled. "Of course, I do read academic literature for my lesson planning, but when it comes to personal pleasure, I enjoy fiction." "Good, as I hate all things that are poetic," he declared, stopping to glance her way and lend her a teasing smile. "Not that I am demeaning your interest in the art of make-believe storytelling. I prefer a text to say what it means and mean what it says, if you understand my meaning." For a moment, Martha felt puzzled. It seemed that she might have mistaken Mr. Wald's intentions all along. He was not here to take her place, but to study the Duke's collection of rare books. Glancing at him again, she couldn't help but take in a breath of air through her nose to allow her to inhale his scent. He must be writer too, she thought, as her senses took in the aroma of leather and ink. He was an intriguing person in her view. The mystery she had seen in his dark eyes had been real. Here stood a scholarly man of good education, and she pursed her lips with curiosity, continuing to study him in her mind's eye. As she caught herself staring at him, he dropped his eyeglass and it hung on a chain from his waistcoat pocket. He glared back at her with inquiring eyes. "Have I offended you in any way, Miss Martha?" he asked, a look of worry on his brows. "Would you like an honest answer, Mr. Wald?" she asked, feeling brave because she wanted to be honest with this charming man before her. Mr. Wald turned around to place the book back into the cabinet and closed the glass door, not yet locking it. Walking over to the table where Martha's books were spread out, he took a seat and indicated with an outstretched arm that she also be seated. "I sense that something is bothering you, Miss Martha," he said as she sat down opposite him. "I would hope that I am not the cause of your vexation, so please you must share with me what it is that worries you." Martha smiled back at him. "You are most perceptive, Mr. Wald." "Only because I wonder if I am the cause of worry for the lovely lady I see before me," he said, lending her the most charming of smiles. "And please call me Harry, for I hope that you and I will become friends for the duration of my stay." She liked his smile as his mouth turned up at one side of his face, creating a dimple on the same cheek. It was a charming half-smile, but Martha could see that it was genuine too, because his dark eyes twinkled with charm. "Very well, I thought that you were to replace my tutoring with Master Oscar," she admitted with a sense of dread in her stomach, "that I was to be ousted from my current employ and sent on my way." For a moment Mr. Wald said nothing. She could see the cogs turning in his mind as his eyes reflected that he was thinking deeply. She'd placed her hands on the table, ready to begin her studies once they finished their conversation. Unexpectedly, Mr. Wald reached across the table and took each of her hands in his. She wanted to move, but her body was frozen in place. His touch was soft and inviting, and it warmed her very soul. He leaned towards her as he spoke with a soft voice. "Miss Martha, I would be honoured to pass on any of my knowledge that you might see fit to help the young master, but I can wholeheartedly assure you that I would never wish to offend or upset you in any way whatsoever. I can see that you have an intelligent and witty personality, and it would be a privilege to become more acquainted with you, should you would allow it." Martha's fingers tingled at his warm, firm touch, and she almost forgot about the forwardness of his actions. She couldn't even answer him, so captivated was she, at the depth within the pools of his dark eyes. Forcing herself to blink, she pulled her hands away, albeit reluctantly. "You are a gentleman who is generous with his compliments, sir," she managed to speak, as a smile formed on her lips. "Perhaps there is room for our interest to develop together during your stay. The work you do fascinates me, and I am sure Master Oscar will enjoy becoming absorbed in your studies. He is a boy with far too much energy and will benefit greatly from your influence." She watched as Mr. Wald showed no sign of insult at her pulling her hands from his. He sat back in his chair and continued to look back at her. "Then let us devise a plan together, so that I can guide him under your welcome influence into taking an interest in historical facts," he suggested. She nodded in agreement, overjoyed at the thought of spending more time with him. "Yes, I like the sound of that. I am planning his lessons for the coming week, and it would be most agreeable to include you in them. We do not see many visitors to Welwick Hall, so it would do the boy some good to have you show an interest in him." "And may I also show an interest in his teacher?" Mr. Wald asked, raising a single brow as did, which made him look quite comical. Martha blushed, but she also sniggered. "I'm looking forward to your stay here, Mr. Harry," she said, lifting her hand to her mouth to try and cover her amusement. "Though I must warn you that with Master Oscar comes 2 other children that are his dearest of friends." "And I am pleased to hear that he has friends," Mr. Wald said as he remained seated. "I say this through experience because I have always been so wrapped up in my interests that I forget to make friends myself, which is why I welcome your friendship most dearly, Miss Martha." "We have that in common then, Mr. Harry," she said. "I too spend much of my time alone. Other than the 3 children I teach and the master's nursemaid, I have few friends." "I find that hard to understand. I assure you that I will be flattered to be known as your friend, Miss Martha," he said, giving her his charming half-smile. "Now then, who might these other 2 children be?" Martha loved nothing better than discussing the children. They were her life and brought her much joy. "Silas and Vera Atkins are the children of one of the servants," she began. "Ah, I can see why you hesitate," Mr. Wald said, interrupting her. "My cousin, Lord Spencer, will not like his son and heir mingling with the underclass," said with a mocking tone. "I cannot comment on that, well, only to warn you that they can only meet Master Oscar when in class, which frustrates him tremendously," she explained. "His Grace is generous, though, as he does allow the twins to have many lessons." "Twins, you say?" Mr. Wald asked, looking surprised. "This story becomes more intriguing by the minute. We must devise lessons that will include them too. I am, after all, a man of many subjects." "That would be splendid because Silas could do with the influence of a role model in his life," she said. "Is the children's father not present?" he asked, taking a genuine interest in the children. "Sadly no, but that story is intriguing if not a little sad," she continued. "Their father was a man of the sea. He was born in a distant land, possibly Japan or Mongolia, or somewhere in that region. He went missing when they were still babies." "A sailor, eh?" Mr. Wald inquired. "Then we shall talk of the adventures of past seamen and their victories, such as the Vikings and the Romans. We will pepper their education with exploration. I adore studying the Ottoman Empire and the Silk Route. That will give the twins an insight into their heritage. Do you not agree?" "You are ambitious, sir, I will give you that." Martha smiled, a tremor of delight shuddering through her. "It would please me if we could plan a trip into town and visit the local bookshop. I do believe that you might find its archives of great interest in your research. That way we can justify the trip, should His Grace question it." "You are a woman of foresight, I see," Mr. Wald said, smiling as he stood up again. "For now, I shall leave you to your lesson planning, and I will return to my book cabinet. But know this, Miss Martha, your beauty has not escaped my eyes. You are not a person I wish to let slip by while I am deep in study. Let us meet in the library often, so that we may discuss Master Oscar's education, among other topics of interest." "As it happens, I am done for now, Mr. Harry," Martha said, collecting her books together. "I may ad-lib their lessons for the foreseeable future, for I see an adventure before me." "Excellent," Mr. Wald called out as he opened the glass cabinet once again. "I look forward to sharing that adventure with you and the children. Though I warn you, I am not a man like my cousin. I have no time to waste on etiquette and false pretences. Life is too short, and I intend to fill mine with learning and enjoying the company of beautiful women such as yourself." "I cannot ignore the rules of society," Martha said as she stood by the door, ignoring his compliment. "It is my job to ensure that Master Oscar is aware of social etiquette, but he is still a child, and therefore allowed periodic episodes of distraction." "You and I think alike, Miss Martha, and I wish you a very good night," Mr. Wald said, bowing his head in respect as she left the library. Martha went to her bed that night with far too many romantic notions flitting around in her head. She wasn't one to be so flippant, but Mr. Harry Wald was indeed most appealing. Martha was aware that she rarely thought of the opposite gender, let alone allow them to affect her. But always she must put the children first, though she suspected that they too would adore him as much as she did. Chapter 3. Harry was aware that his distant cousin, the Duke of Cornwall, Lord Spencer Wald, was a stickler for etiquette, though rules were something he'd never personally bothered much with. Live and let live was his creed for life. He surmised that while he lived under the Duke's roof, he'd have to make more of an effort. Living in the Duke's house also meant being close to the lovely governess that he'd met with. He'd once had the reputation of being a womanizer, but that was all in the past. Still, he knew a lovely lady when he met one, and Miss Martha certainly fell into that category. Besides, helping the children with their education also appealed to him. The lessons he could impart to them would not likely be found in any of the books they had access to. It was also another way to spend time with Miss Martha, and that would be time well spent. The next day he announced to the Duke at breakfast that he would be taking the children to a bookshop in Falmouth. "We can take in the harbour and the ships too," he added, hoping to sell the idea to the Duke. "I am not sure that the Atkins children can be released from their duties." Lord Spencer came back at him, using a formidable tone. "I would encourage you to take Oscar, get him to buy books on English grammar and such like, and none of that fictional nonsense that seems to be all the rage with the women." As Harry cracked his boiled egg open, he began to realise how difficult Miss Martha must be finding it to get the children together. The Duke really was a stickler. "I will speak with Cook. She is the twins' mother, Mr. Harry," Lady Sarah intervened, much to his delight. "It will be wonderful for Oscar to have company on his trip. Thank you, Mr. Harry. It is thoughtful of you to consider the children's education, and I will provide coins so that they can all have fun." It was a great relief that Lady Sarah had disregarded her husband's instructions. Whilst Harry would not wish to go against the Duke's wishes, he would have found some way to include the twins anyway. "Make sure that you take the governess along with you," Lord Spencer added. "She will ensure that those twins are kept in their place because they can be unruly without her presence." "I will, Your Grace," Harry agreed, thankful that the Duke was no longer objecting. He wouldn't dream of taking children out on his own. He had too little experience with them, other than the few lectures he'd taken in a classroom at the colleges. There, he was often called upon in his hometown of Cambridge to give lectures on his specialist topics. Then again, those pupils were more adolescents than young children. "Fear not, Spencer. The children will have a wonderful time. Is that not so, Mr. Harry?" Lady Sarah remarked, and he could see that she was determined the trip would go ahead. "Yes, yes, but I would feel more comfortable if Harry could just spend his time with Oscar," Lord Spencer replied. "The boy needs to learn what a real literature is. He is always going on about that Shakespeare chap, and I fear that he reads far too much fiction." "The Shakespeare chap is a genius, Spencer," Lady Sarah called out in surprise at her husband's insult for one of her favourite authors. "One of the best playwrights I've ever read." "Bah! You must excuse my wife, Harry. She's a romantic and revels in the tragedies of such plays," the Duke remarked, frowning over at his wife. "I must say that I am in agreement with Lady Sarah," Harry replied, not afraid to speak up. "He expands upon the English language in a most unusual way." "Yes, well, make sure the servants' children do not distract Oscar from his lessons," Lord Spencer added, followed by puffing open his broadsheet newspaper to hide behind. "My husband is not a great reader of fiction, Mr. Harry," Lady Sarah said, smiling her husband's way. "You must forgive his ignorance in that area." Harry didn't reply. Instead, he bowed his head and smiled. "I will be taking a carriage if I may, and we shall be gone at least until dinner time." "We appreciate that you have much to teach our son during your visit, Mr. Harry," Lady Sarah said. "Do take your time and remember to have fun in Falmouth too. It should not all be about learning." Harry stood up and bowed to the lady, excusing himself from the room. After visiting the classroom to confirm the trip with Miss Martha, he found the butler, asking him to organise a carriage for the day. "I do love the ocean," Vera declared in the carriage on their ride into Falmouth. "It's so vast, and can we visit a tea-house and then buy books and—" "Slow down, little one," Harry laughed. "We will do all we can, at least until it is time for us to leave. What is more, we shall visit the tea-house first and take refreshments before we start our tour around the town. Did you know, children," Miss Martha began, "that Lord Byron himself has stayed in Falmouth? We will learn so much while in the company of Mr. Harry. I am sure there will be something for everyone throughout the course of the day." Harry had not said much, leaving the children to their chatter. He was too busy stealing sly glances at the lovely Miss Martha and hoping to think up plenty of excuses to spend more time with her. "Will there be, Mr. Harry?" Vera's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Will there be what, Vera?" he asked, smiling at the bright little girl, whose almond-shaped eyes stared back at him. "Something for everyone," Vera mimicked the words. "For me, I wish to see the ocean, and then buy a book, and then eat in a tea-house." "There are 2 castles built to defend the town of Falmouth," Master Oscar piped up, showing enthusiasm. "Pendennis and Moors. I read it in a book about castles." "That is very good, Master Oscar," Miss Martha praised the boy. "I doubt we shall have time to visit them today, but we can still have fun. Is that not so, Mr. Harry?" Harry looked up to see Miss Martha's bright blue eyes staring at him, and his chest felt tight as he delighted in her attentions. "We will each of us return with a book, that is for sure," Mr. Harry replied, giving Miss Martha one of his most charming of smiles. "But the most important part is that we enjoy one another's company." The carriage dropped them off, the driver agreeing to pick them up at the same spot at 4 of the clock. As promised, they visited a little tea-house called the Cottage Room. As it happened, Miss Martha had discovered it on one of her visits to the dressmaker in Falmouth. It consisted of a couple of old ladies who sold their baking to the diners that sat down and took tea with them. They all enjoyed a piece of honey cake, along with the sweetest plums ever, and a drink of diluted mead. Even though the place was frequented by only the elite of society, Harry still enjoyed their time there. He thanked Miss Martha for recommending it, saying it was the perfect start to their day. They followed their noses and strolled toward the salty sea waves. The children walked in front, and Harry took the opportunity to walk by Miss Martha's side. As he leaned to talk with her, he stood tall and firm, alert to her every move and every smile. With a thudding in his chest, his palms were also sweaty, which surprised him, as he'd never felt so nervous in the presence of any woman. He extended his arm out to guide her toward an iron fence post, and as he touched her coat, his fingers tingled with delight. They had reached the harbour and looked upon an array of wooden ships in all shapes and sizes. "Look at those with their sails up," Silas pointed out, excited at seeing the mixture of merchant ships and frigates. "Do you think the frigates have guns?" he asked, showing a longing in his eyes. "I'm sure they do," Harry replied. "But I must be the bearer of grave news, because the frigate was actually invented by the French, created to berth the crew below deck." "Well, we have Leda-class frigates with guns in our Royal Naval Forces, so we will get our own back," Master Oscar bellowed. "I wish I was old enough to go and fight on one of them. Father would be proud of me then." Now, lad, war is never a good thing," Harry lectured, placing his arm around the young lad's shoulders to emphasize his point. "People die in wars, and it causes much sadness in everyone's hearts. I, for one, am glad that you are not of an age to go out into the world and do battle. There is no joy in it." "But Father says—" "Master Oscar, this is to be a day of fun." Miss Martha stepped in, and Harry was impressed by how she handled the boisterousness of young men. "Let us consider all the other ships out there, for the sake of our education alone. I happen to know there are also many package boats sailing into Falmouth, working hard to bring our letters from overseas." "Do you think any of them are steamships?" Vera pondered, looking out at the various ships in the harbour. "We will never know as it is time to move on, children," Harry announced. He thought it was becoming a little congested on the harbour front, as sailors were busy unloading their wares. "It smells bad, or is that you, Silas?" Vera joked, only as a sister could with her brother. At least it brought a little lightness to the party, and Silas chased his sister as they moved on. "I'm enjoying our time here, Miss Martha, especially in the enchanting company of yourself," Harry dared to say to her as the children ran on ahead. "Vera, please mind the hemline of your dress," Miss Martha warned as the children gathered mud on their shoes. "Yes, we are having a wonderful time, thanks to you, Mr. Harry." "We must do this again," he suggested, "and often too. We will find ways of taking the children out on trips. Educational ones, of course." "Are you suggesting that I use the children to enjoy your company, sir?" Miss Martha asked, her brows raised in surprise. And then she burst out into a tinkling laughter, and he loved the sound of her melodious laugh. "Are we to go to the bookshop next, Mr. Harry?" Vera asked, running back to the adults to check why they were so behind. "That we are, little one," he confirmed, and watched as she ran to inform the boys of her joyous news. "They are lovely children, and you tutor them well," he praised the governess. "Each of them has a unique character bursting to get out, yet they restrain themselves when they need to. That is all your training shining through." Again Miss Martha gave out a little song of laughter. "I am a great believer in allowing children to speak their minds, but not when his lordship is about, of course, or the butler for that matter. Both are believers in strict behaviour. Yes, I can think of many a scholar who might agree with you, but that is the way of the English, is it not?" Mr. Harry said with a sigh. "We spend all our time making up rules, forgetting that life is for living, most especially when we are adults." "Yes, I do understand what you mean, but we are having fun with you around, Mr. Harry," she shared with him as they arrived at the bookshop.
Thank you for watching. Before we continue into the story, make us a favor. Hit the subscribe button. This way we will be able to create more audiobooks for free for you. Thank you again. Now, back to our story.
A bell rang out above the door, and the smell of dusty old books assailed Harry's nose. For the most part, he was immune to the sour odour of old books. If anything, he relished it, because it meant the pages might be very old within their leather-bound jackets. "May I go to the fiction section, Miss Martha, please?" Vera begged. "Wait for me first. Let me sort out the boys," Miss Martha replied. "Which section will you both be looking through today?" "Ships," they said in unison. Well then, it is decided, she smiled, pointing them in the right direction. Often when they visited a bookshop, there would be much debate on what they were to buy. For most of the time, they ended up buying a book for the classroom, so unruly were their disagreements. Off you go then, she told the boys, who dashed off to read the labels of the tall bookshelves. I will speak with the owner about my interests, Harry said, reluctant to leave her side. Enjoy your perusing, Miss Martha. Time in the bookshop passed by all too quickly. By the time the children clambered back into the carriage for their return journey, they were much quieter. Vera leaned against Miss Martha and fell asleep, while the boys each had their noses stuck in their books. Did you find anything of interest in the bookshop, Mr. Harry? Miss Martha asked him. I have a Spanish book written on the 80 Years' War, Harry informed her. Though I have not dated the parchment yet, and the bookshop owner was no historian. You speak the language? She asked, and he liked that she was taking an interest in him, which appeared quite genuine. I speak many languages, Miss Martha, some fluent, others not so, and yourself, he asked. I'm teaching the children French, but Master Oscar often rebels, saying he does not wish to speak the language of those we are at war with, she informed him. Ah, what is it with boys and wars, eh? He grinned. We are captivated by it, we men, and yet for most it brings naught but death and sorrow. You show wisdom in your nature, sir, Miss Martha said, lending him a kindness in her soft eyes. There are not many that dare to voice such an honest opinion on war. The carriage soon arrived back, and the housekeeper greeted them. She informed the party that they were expected to dine with Lady Sarah, for she wished to know all about their day. It was a wonderful dinner, and with the absence of Lord Spencer, all the children were able to relax. It seemed to Harry that Lady Sarah was most fond of all three children, and not only her own son. All through dinner, Harry dared to steal glances at Miss Martha, who bloomed in the presence of the children. He knew there and then that Miss Martha Rose would make some lucky man a fine wife. Chapter 4. You have the most angelic voice I have ever heard, Master Oscar said to Vera as she finished singing to his playing on the pianoforte. You know that I love to sing, Master Oscar, and I thank you for inviting me to your music lessons, Vera replied with a cheeky grin. It helps Master Oscar to concentrate better, Martha said, pleased with Master Oscar's progress on the pianoforte. He wasn't a keen student when it came to music. If he gets the notes wrong, he knows it will put you off your singing, and so he makes an extra effort to play well. That is why I always agree for you to join him. And now we will do something different. I want Vera to play the pianoforte, and Master Oscar, you can play your violin. The children groaned because Master Oscar had not quite mastered the violin yet either. It could be quite painful to listen to him. Master Oscar, you must keep practicing, Martha told him, or you will never be successful at it. That is the key to all things that you might struggle with. Practice. I do not play the pianoforte as well as Master Oscar does, Vera complained as she took her seat on the piano stool. Can I not simply sing along to his violin? No, Vera, I want to teach you all that I can while I am still here, Martha insisted. There will come a time when you will be pleased that you have learned so much in your life. You can then become a proper lady and perhaps even a governess yourself. Ma says that I am to be a cook and that's all there is to it, Vera piped up, thinking her statement might get her out of the lesson. Well then, you can be a musical cook, Martha concluded, pointing to the girl's hands to place her fingers on the keyboard. And so, the painful playing began. Master Oscar screeched out on the violin, with Vera pretending to hit the wrong keys on the pianoforte. Martha knew that Vera was quite accomplished on the pianoforte, and so she was determined that they would keep going. What she hadn't known was that the Duke had entered the room, and he called out for the hullabaloo to stop. Stop this ear-splitting noise, he yelled over them, holding his hands out to shut the children up. What is this, Miss Martha? Why is Vera attending my son's music lessons? I gave no permission for the twins to be learning lessons that they will never need. Let us not forget that servants do not play musical instruments, do they? They may not, Your Grace, but it helps Master Oscar to concentrate when— Martha attempted to explain. The twins should not be in lessons in the afternoons. They should be at their chores in the kitchens, should they not? the Duke asked. Vera is very fond of music, Your Grace, Martha tried again. That is not what I asked. The Duke spoke with a harshness in his tone. It was clear that he was not pleased. I am fond of pigs, but you do not see me in the pigsty, do you? Certainly not, Your Grace, but I was only— This must stop, Miss Martha, Lord Spencer bellowed. While ever you waste your time teaching the servants subjects that have no bearing on their lives, it is to the detriment of my son's education. Do you understand? But, Father, it is not Miss Martha's fault. Master Oscar spoke up in his governess's defence. I asked if Vera could join me. You shall not speak unless you are spoken to, young man, the Duke barked, not at all pleased with his son's offering. Ah, Lord Spencer, another voice called out. Martha knew who it was and felt a sudden embarrassment that Mr. Harry had walked in to witness her being reprimanded by the Duke. That was not how she wanted Mr. Harry to think of her. What is it, Harry? And why do you have Silas with you? Should these children not be in the kitchen? Lord Spencer questioned, though his tone had softened now that he was speaking with his cousin. Perhaps, but as you can see, Silas is carrying upon his person the equipment needed for Master Oscar's next lesson, Mr. Harry pointed out. Lord Spencer turned to look at the items hanging on Silas's shoulder. I'm about to teach your son some fencing lessons. I planned for us to go out into the garden, and so asked Miss Martha if she could entertain Vera so that she would not feel left out. We had merely gone to fetch the equipment. Fencing, you say? Lord Spencer asked, looking mighty pleased. Now there is a lesson my son could do with. My thoughts exactly, Lord Spencer, Mr. Harry replied. As he will also need a partner to fence with, I asked the children's mother if they could be released from their chores for an hour or two. I see. Well, that throws a new light on things, I suppose, Lord Spencer said, looking fondly at his cousin. I loved fencing as a boy, so I thank you, Harry. It is a splendid idea, and I will leave you all to it. Thank you, Lord Spencer. I was fond of the sport too, Mr. Harry responded. It will wear off some of that energy that young people tend to have far too much of. Very well, then. I do hope you will teach my son many other topics while you are here, Harry, Lord Spencer added. A male teacher is a good prospect. You do me a good turn that I will not forget. With that, the Duke turned and left the music room, and Martha breathed a huge sigh of relief. Mr. Harry had come to her rescue, and she no longer felt embarrassed. We are to learn to fence, Master Oscar called out, looking thrilled to be participating in such a sport. That is most exciting, Mr. Harry. I cannot thank you enough for saving us, Mr. Harry, Miss Martha said, looking into his amused eyes. Me too, Mr. Harry, Vera added. I thought the Duke would punish me for sure, and in truth I do love my music lessons so very much. I could hear that you were all in a pickle as we walked up the corridor, Mr. Harry said, giving Vera a wink of his eye. It was the least I could do. You, Vera, can stay on with Miss Martha and practice your music, while your brother helps out with Master Oscar's fencing lessons. Can I, Miss Martha? I would so enjoy it if I could, Vera asked, her brown eyes sparkling with hope. Do you not wish to come and watch us fencing? Master Oscar asked. Later, perhaps, Martha replied to Master Oscar's request, but she felt pleased to have Vera alone for a while so that the girl would concentrate better. Why don't you run along and help Silas with the equipment, young Oscar? You both need to find a good spot in the garden, Mr. Harry suggested. As the boys jiggled the practice swords of foils and epées around noisily, Martha took Mr. Harry aside. I'm truly thankful, Mr. Harry, she told him, enjoying being close to him far too much. Why then do I see worry written in your lovely blue eyes? He asked, lending her one of his lopsided and most charming of smiles. I fear that my time at Welwick Hall may be coming to an end very soon, she replied, wondering why she was telling him her darkest fears. I cannot teach a boy the sports that he craves. No young man ever takes music lessons very seriously, so his lordship may start to consider that the boy needs a male teacher. Well, I am here for now, and I will speak with Lady Sarah over the topic, to help put your mind at rest, Mr. Harry offered, placing his hand on her arm, which sent an odd sensation through Martha's body. That will not be necessary, Mr. Harry, she said, nervous at his touch. Though I am grateful for your help today, she added, wishing he was to stay in the classroom by her side. The boys had not moved on as far as they should have, and were becoming quite rowdy as they lingered in the music room. They'd been delayed because of their playful sparring with the practice swords, so Mr. Harry stepped in. "Very well, my loyal little helpers, let us be off to the gardens. There we may parry, thrust, and riposte to our heart's content." Martha watched on as Mr. Harry moved the boys along. It gladdened her heart to see his genuine interest in their education, and she wished he would never leave. He was such a kind-hearted gentleman, which caused her to wonder if she wanted him to stay for herself or for the children's sakes. It was fast becoming obvious to her that she was getting over fond of him in more ways than one. Chapter 5. "Let us continue with your music lesson, Vera," Martha suggested, as she watched Mr. Harry leave with a sense of longing, wishing he could stay. She could not deny to herself that did like to be around him. Her eyes stared after him for longer than she'd meant, but thankfully no one seemed to notice. She had to admire him for taking the boys on by himself with what must be a difficult sport. "Can we join them later, Miss Martha?" Vera asked, looking at Martha with an amused expression. Martha wondered if the child had noticed her longing stare, so she attempted to cover it up with a stern reply. "A young lady cannot be seen practicing the sword, Vera," Martha tutted as she turned her attention to the music sheet. "But I am not and never will be a young lady. Will I, Miss Martha?" Vera pointed out. "I am aware that I'm not born to a rich family." Martha could find no answer. She could see that Vera was starting to recognize her place in life. It was going to be a frustrating and hard journey for the young girl very soon, as it would be all three of them once Master Oscar left. But now that she had the girl alone, there would be no harm in having a heart-to-heart conversation with her. "We shall talk as you practice the pianoforte," Martha offered, hoping not to upset the girl, but rather help her to see the road ahead in her life. "The more educated you are, the better your chances are of a decently paid role in your life. I see no point in learning to play a musical instrument. If I can't practice every day, you know that I will never be good at it, Miss Martha," Vera snapped, slamming down the lid of the instrument. "Goodness, Vera," Martha called out, staring at the girl as she sat on the music stool looking gloomy. "Whatever has come over you?" "I know that I'm only the daughter of a servant, Miss Martha. Let's stop pretending I need an education. I'll never be a lady, so why do you waste your time teaching me?" she exclaimed, her pretty face contorted with frustration. "I know that the Duke doesn't like me and my brother to be with Master Oscar anymore. You risk too much when you include us in his lessons." "Lift up the lid, Vera, and get practicing your notes," Martha insisted as she sat by Vera on the music stool. "We will do the notes together as we talk." "I don't know why you do this," Vera asked sulkily, but she did as Martha asked. "I will never be a mistress of any manor house. What's the use of all this learning? It makes me too tired to help Mother in the kitchen." Martha didn't answer straight away. Instead, she continued to play the keys necessary for Vera to mimic and learn. "You could say the same about me, Vera. I will never marry a man of title either," Martha uttered, "but nor am I living the hard life of a maid." Vera didn't answer, and Martha was pleased that the girl at least concentrated playing the right keys on the instrument. "I see how you look at Mr. Harry," Vera said out of the blue, but still she continued to practice her fingers on the keyboard. It was Martha who stopped playing as she turned to look at the girl. "For a young girl, you are beyond your years, Vera," she remarked, standing up to watch Vera's practicing hands. "He likes you too," Vera sniggered, but still she continued to practice. "I can tell by how he watches you all the time." "Concentrate on playing the keys, and let your imagination rest itself for now," Martha said, a little sterner than she meant to. "If you are educated, you can hope to find an equally educated husband." Vera said nothing, but her piano playing intensified. Martha could see that the child was deep in thought as she hit the right keys and played a fine melody. But then, without warning, she hammered her hands down on the keyboard, hitting every note harshly so that it screeched in Martha's ears. "No, Miss Martha," Vera said, holding her head down as if in shame of her actions. "That is not true. No educated man will want to marry a cook's daughter. Your father had wealth, Miss Martha. I don't even have a father." Martha was relieved that the Duke had not come running it at the calamity on the pianoforte. Once again, she took her seat on the music stool by the side of Vera and placed her arm over the girl's shoulders. "You are quite right, Vera," she said with a softness in her tone, "but know that I lost both my parents at around the same age that you are now. Being alone in the world is not easy, though I did have an elderly aunt who came to my rescue. It was my saving grace that she saw to my education, so I was then able to take on the role of a governess. You see, education is a good thing, and it will help you gain some station in your life. That is why I fight so hard to include you and your brother in Master Oscar's lessons." "I am sorry you lost your parents so young, Miss Martha, but Mother says I will take her place in the kitchens when she can no longer work," Vera told her. As she spoke, she placed her small hands over her face, rubbing at her eyes, no doubt to push back the tears that threatened to escape. "I do not need to play the pianoforte to be a cook, do I?" Martha paused in her reply, because in a way the girl was right. She then pulled Vera towards her and hugged the girl. "Then at least you shall be an educated cook," Martha said as an afterthought. Vera burst out laughing as she pulled away from her teacher's embrace. "What is so funny?" Martha asked, but she could see that Vera's mirth was genuine. "I will be a very special cook, one who can do fancy needlework, play music, dance and read and write. Best of all, I will know arithmetic, geography, history, and little Latin too," the girl said, laughing on and on. "Oh, and let's not forget that I am learning to speak French too, which will help me to read French recipes." Martha laughed with her, and the two of them enjoyed a few happy moments together. Then Martha placed her finger over her lips and asked the girl to hush. "The word you are looking for is an impoverished gentlewoman," Martha whispered as they quietened down. "That is what you shall be, much the same as myself." "I will not be a gentlewoman, Miss Martha," Vera said, showing how grown up she could be when she was not with the boys. "I was born into servitude." "I was born on a farm and now I live in a mansion house," Martha tried. "Mother tells me I should have no shame in being a cook," Vera quoted, holding her head up high. "A good cook is appreciated by everyone, and I will inherit all her secret recipes too." "You are quite right, Vera," Martha said, knowing that making the child into a lady was never going to happen. "But you can also be an educated cook. Where is the harm in that? Now let us continue our music lesson, so that when you attend the servants' balls you can entertain them all." The next hour passed them by, and Martha thought that Vera played the pianoforte equally as well as Master Oscar. If she kept up her lessons, whenever they could fit them in, she would soon excel in her musical skills. Not much use for a cook, but who knew what the girl's fate might be? Though she was born into wealth, Martha suspected that she would never marry a man of wealth. The likes of the handsome Mr. Harry would never be that interested in marrying a woman who had to earn her way. Thinking of his handsome, strong frame as he fenced with the boys, she sighed. If only she could marry a man as wonderful as he. They finished the lesson with Martha playing a popular tune so that they could enjoy a good sing-song together. "Can we go and watch the boys in the garden now?" Vera begged excitedly. "I suppose so," Martha said, putting the music sheet away in a safe place, though she secretly wanted to go and watch Mr. Harry anyway. "I wonder if they are black and blue with bruises yet." "You do like Mr. Harry, though, don't you, Miss Martha?" Vera sang out as they made their way to the garden. "He is a very kind gentleman, so it is hard not to like him." Martha smiled back at the girl's inquisitive looks. "But yes, I do like him," she added shyly as she looked away. "Will you marry him?" Vera pushed on, and Martha knew that she must forgive the curiosity of a 10-year-old girl. "Ever the romantic, are you not?" Martha answered, pushing her shyness aside. "No one is getting married, Vera, so get that notion from your silly head." Vera and Martha enjoyed a good chuckle at the very idea. "Indeed, I would welcome a man as charming as Mr. Harry, but like you, Vera, I'm not destined to marry a man of wealth, though Master Oscar is determined that you will be his bride, so we must work on showing him the truth of things. One day he will marry a lady of his equal ranking and stop his daydreaming." Vera turned and stopped. "You and me, Miss Martha, we know it'll never happen," the girl admitted. "One day soon, Master Oscar will have to leave us. When he goes out into the world, I do think that he will start to meet many pretty ladies and forget all about me. Now come, I want a turn with the wooden sword before they finish." Martha was surprised at how sensible little Vera could be. She knew that it must hard for her because she and Master Oscar were close. From a distance, they could hear the clashing of wooden swords as they walked through the garden. Brushing all thoughts of such things aside for now, Martha watched the girl run off as she went to pick up a wooden sword. Vera was quick to join in the affray with the boys, while Mr. Harry walked over to greet Martha. "They look as if they have had a tremendous time, Mr. Harry," Martha pointed out, smiling as he looked her way. "Master Oscar is a natural," Mr. Harry told her. "He will do well if he is willing to put in the practice. I intend to encourage him, and Silas too, when he is available." Martha nodded as she listened. It pleased her that Master Oscar was getting to learn the skills expected of a young gentleman. "By the way, I spoke with my Lady Sarah with regards to Master Oscar's continued education," Mr. Harry said, turning to watch the children. "Goodness, was that wise?" Martha asked. She hadn't wanted to encourage such a conversation. As it happens, they have already arranged for the boy to attend lessons a couple of days a week. He is to join a day school with a local clergy who runs classes for boys, Mr. Harry imparted his news. "But you shall be continuing to teach him in his home classroom, which Lady Sarah said that she had insisted upon it." Martha wasn't sure what to say. Should she thank him for finding this out, or scold him for daring to bring it up with her employers? "I know you did this as a kindness for me, Mr. Harry, so one supposes that I must thank you," Martha admitted. "It is a good thing for Master Oscar that he will partake in lessons with other boys too." They walked toward the rowdy children, ready to break up the faux battle between them. "There is one thing I would like to ask of you, Miss Martha," Mr. Harry said, pausing in his step. "May I ask if you are ever given any time away from your duties?" "On Sunday after church, I am given the rest of the day for my leisure," she replied, "so that Master Oscar may enjoy the company of his mother." "That is a day when the bookshop will be closed," he said, looking disappointed. "I was going to ask if you would accompany me there, but alas, it cannot be." "Then you have asked the right person, Mr. Harry," Martha said, showing Mr. Harry a happy grin. "I happen to know the bookshop owner very well because she allows me into her shop on Sundays when it is closed. I will make the arrangements for you to peruse there for the afternoon, or at least until you tire of it." "I would like that very much, Miss Martha," he replied, looking pleased, "but it will be all the more pleasurable in your company." Chapter 6. Whatever part of the world Harry had ever found himself in, Sunday was usually the quietest and most peaceful day. A day of rest for most, though sadly not for all, and a day to reflect on one's life. Today was no exception, and he was looking forward to going to church. There he would meet with Miss Martha following the service. The Anglican parish church was situated in the local town of Odell. Every Sunday, the rich and poor mingled, at least for the duration of the religious service. The Wald family took 2 carriages into Odell, one carrying the children and their governess, with Lady Sarah too, whereas Harry joined the Duke in a smaller carriage. The servants walked into the town, and Harry wished he could join them, as he preferred to take a brisk walk on a morning. The carriages pulled up, and the Duke awaited his wife and children to disembark, after which they all entered the dimly lit church together. Lord Spencer rented a high-sided, boxed wooden pew where the family would be seated for the service. As he entered it, Harry felt lucky as he managed to follow Master Oscar. He sat by the boy's side, with Miss Martha on the boy's other side. Soon the church filled up and hymns sang out by the parishioners. It wasn't long before the clergyman was preaching a rather dull sermon. Every time Harry took a sideways glance over at Miss Martha, she too was looking at him, and this pleased him, though with Master Oscar between them they could hardly converse. He listened to the odd word of the biblical text as the clergy presented his God to the ordinary people. The clergyman's voice echoed around the church. Many poor souls may perish at the wheels of the new machines, but still they can prosper if they follow the word of God. Harry couldn't see much over the high-sided pew, other than the clergyman on his pulpit. He was aware that many churchgoers would be standing at the back of the church all the way through the service. Thankfully not the servants from Welwick Hall, as the Duke at least hired enough benched pews for his workers. The church itself had a Gothic style to it, and being a very old building, it felt cold and damp. The structure was falling into decay, and he pondered on whether the local nobles would come together to build a replacement church. As his mind wandered, in order to avoid the droning sermon, he deliberated on many things. Then, a thrill of excitement rushed through him as he remembered what was to follow the arduous church service. Again he smiled over at Miss Martha as Master Oscar fidgeted in his seat. "I wish I could sit with my friends," the boy whispered to him. "It would not make the sermon go any faster," Harry whispered back to him, and the boy grinned with a cheeky face. "We had better stop our whisperings or your father might hear us. Then we will both be in trouble," Harry said into Oscar's ear, lending the boy a pleasant smile. Master Oscar nodded his agreement and didn't reply, but Miss Martha had heard their whispered words, and she flashed Harry a stern stare. In return, he gave her a small smile, and her eyes softened. Turning his attention back to the sermon, he was glad that at last it had ended. Prayers were read, and with the final prayer, Amen was said by all. One of the disadvantages of having a pew at the front of the church was waiting for everyone else to leave. At last, they stepped out into the brightness of the day, and now the fun was to begin. He had already explained his plans for the afternoon to the Duke on their journey to church. Lord Spencer had objected to begin with, warning Harry on the plights of being alone with a woman. Harry mentioned that he had high hopes for his finds in this particular bookshop. The owner had sent him word of some unusual old copies they had in their archives. This served to appease the Duke, and he wished him luck. Harry waited by the gate as Miss Martha accompanied Master Oscar into the carriage with his mother. Once both carriages had set off in the direction of the manor house, Miss Martha made her way toward him. "It is a short walk to Odell High Street, Mr. Harry," she said, facing him. "I hope you do not mind." "Not in the least. I'm only too thrilled at being in your pleasant company, Miss Martha, to be disappointed with anything," he told her, watching her set off to lead the way. "I must admit it is much pleasanter out in the sun than it was cooped up in church," Miss Martha remarked as she continued to walk. "Do you attend the service every week, Miss Martha?" he asked, wondering if she was a devout practitioner. "I attend whenever the family does," she answered. "They do not go every week. However, most of the servants do, but for me I prefer to take walks with nature in my private time than attend the long sermons in church." "Well, that is one thing that we have in common then," he said, chuckling that she too had endured the drawn-out experience. "There are other more interesting clergymen that visit the church, and I do like to attend if I know they are coming," she added. "But Father Watson is old now, and I do believe that his mind wanders as he's preaching." "Ah, is that what it was?" he said, smiling at her, as she looked his way. "Here we are," Miss Martha said as they approached a building with an old woman standing in the doorway. "This is Mrs. Woodburn, the shop owner," Martha said, introducing her to him. "It is very kind of you, Mrs. Woodburn, to allow us access while you are closed," he said to the old woman. She looked quite scholarly as she stood up straight and tall, though not quite his height. She was taller than Miss Martha. "Not at all, Mr. Wald. I am always happy to do a favour for the Duke's family," she replied, putting a large key into a hole in the tall door. "Come on in and tell me what it is that you hope to find." The three of them entered the shop, and he instantly felt at home with the woody aroma emanating from the pages of so many books. "You have quite a collection here," Harry said, looking around. Shelves were stacked from floor to ceiling with an array of books in all shapes and sizes. "I'm the third generation to own the family business, Mr. Harry," Mrs. Woodburn told him. "Though, as you can see, I may not be the tidiest. As I wrote to you, the oldest of my collections are in the basement, so that might be a good place for you to begin your search." "Do you have many scrolls?" he asked. "Or any tablets?" "All my rare copies are down there, so take yourself off and have a good rummage," she offered. "I can't stay as I have visitors in my home today. Miss Martha will provide me with a list of anything you wish to purchase, and I will bill you later in the week." "That is most agreeable, Mrs. Woodburn," he answered. "I thank you for your trusting nature." "Any friend of Miss Martha's is very welcome, Mr. Wald." Mrs. Woodburn smiled back at him. Miss Martha knows where to bring the key when you are done." With that, she said her goodbyes, and finally, Harry was alone with Miss Martha, who was busy lighting lamps so they could better see in the dim basement. "I will open this small window if I can," he said, reaching up to it as it was positioned on the top of the red brick-built wall. That should help disperse the smell of the candles. "I don't like to light the lamps with all these precious books, but you will not be able to see if I do not do it," she said, smiling over at him. He could see her lovely face now that there was a little light, and he had the urge to go to her and kiss her smiling lips. But she was brave enough to be alone with him, so he would not take advantage of her, though it was getting harder every day not to tell her how he felt about her. "Right, I will go through all the scrolls, and you can start on that pile of boxes that contain books," he instructed. "That is, if you do not mind." "Mind, Mr. Harry?" Miss Martha grinned at him. "I will have so much fun assisting you. That is why I am here." He watched her enthusiastically go to the stacked boxes. A thrill ran through his nerves. It was so good to find a woman who had the same interests as him. He went to aid her, reaching up again, only this time to lift a box down to the ground for Miss Martha to peruse. "Are you sure you wish to do this, Miss Martha?" he questioned again. "It can be a dirty business." Her sweet lips curled into a smile again, and he longed to lean in and stroke her soft cheek. "Like you, Mr. Harry, I have a great love of books," she said, taking an apron from the purse bag she'd been carrying. "It gives me great pleasure to be in your company, assisting you, and I have even come prepared." "You are a pretty sight, Miss Martha," he dared to tell her. "I'm so very pleased that we have met in such good circumstances." "We will not have the light through that tiny window for much longer." She pointed at the small piece of glass. Putting the box on a wonky table, she started to read the spines of the books. "We had better get on with it." He rummaged around his jacket pocket and pulled out a pair of metal-framed round spectacles. Putting them on, he started on his boxes, carefully unravelling scrolls. "I must say, Mr. Harry, you look most handsome in your spectacles," he heard Miss Martha say. "I hope you do not think me too forward in saying so." Looking up, he saw her looking his way and smiling. "They allow me to read for longer, otherwise I get headaches," he explained. "Then read on, Mr. Harry, and let us hope we find something that might interest you," she said, picking up another book. "Will you look at that? All hidden away. What a little gem," she called out, looking delighted with the book in her hands. "What is it, Miss Martha, that has you so excited?" Harry chuckled, because he knew how good it felt when one found a book that stirred one's emotions. "Vindications of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft," she read, turning the pages to peruse it. "I shall most certainly be buying this one. She is the mother of Mary Shelley and quite controversial. It will make a good bedtime read." "Ah, she is the one who jumped in the River Thames to commit suicide," Mr. Harry said as he went to look at the book. "A tragic life she led," he added, allowing the book to distract him. "Yes, she died not long after giving birth to her second daughter, Mary," Miss Martha added. "Are you sure you wish to read an author who is so provocative by nature?" he asked. "All the more reason to read her works, Mr. Harry," Miss Martha replied with a confident air. "I'm a scholar at times, and I enjoy the works of philosophy, in particular female ones." "Then have it you shall," Harry said, pleased that Miss Martha was so honest with him. He had been so busy going through the scrolls that he'd almost forgotten that he was alone with Miss Martha. Harry was about to say something to her when something caught his eye on a shelf. Pausing in his speech, he went over to pick up a large leather satchel. Opening it, he pulled out a scroll and then another. It pleased him to see that there were many more inside. Reading one of the scrolls that stood out the most to him, he gasped. "By Jove, this satchel is quite a find," he said, sharing his enthusiasm. "Not only have I found what I seek, but there are many scrolls here that I could never have believed I would get to lay my hands upon. I have found the big prize, Miss Martha. This is most exciting." This time, Miss Martha came over to him to take a peek at the fine scrolls he was laying out on the table. "Careful, Miss Martha. Best not to handle them too much, for they may crumble," he warned. Within an hour, Miss Martha had listed all the scrolls he wished to keep. He wrapped the scrolls carefully back up again and returned them back inside the satchel. "It looks like we are done here, Miss Martha," he announced. "We have both come out of this venture with success, it seems." He looked over at her as she was busy tidying away books into boxes, and he went to close the window. "I will walk with you to Mrs. Woodburn's house, and we will then walk home together," he said. "What about the scrolls you need to carry?" she asked as she blew out some of the candle lamps. "Even if it is raining, they will be safe in this leather satchel, and it is very light," he replied, following her up the cold stone steps. "I have much to thank you for, Miss Martha," he added as she closed the cellar door. "It was not I who found your sack, sir, it was you," she said, looking puzzled. "If not for your invitation to this bookshop, I would never have found such treasures," he said as they left the shop, and Miss Martha locked the main door. "We only need to go around the corner," she explained as they walked through a pebbled street. "I will post the key along with the list and some coins for my book, which I cannot wait to read." It wasn't quite dark yet outside, but the light was fading fast. "Are there any carriages for hire in this town?" he asked. "No, but we can walk along the highway quite safely. It is a clear road and should take us around an hour to get to Welwick Hall," she said. "Miss Martha, I cannot expect you to walk so far. Surely there is someone who will loan us a carriage?" he asked again. "I am familiar with the walk, sir, having done it at least once a week for many years." She chuckled and turned as he stopped walking. "What is it, Mr. Harry?" "I would like to ask you if I can repay your kindness," he said, looking at her blue eyes that stared back at him quizzically. "Let me take you to the opera house. We would have so much fun together, you and I. You would do me such an honour if you agreed." "A governess cannot be seen at such a social event, Mr. Harry," she answered, but he could see the disappointment in her eyes, most especially with a nobleman. "Nonsense," he said. "If you are a woman willing to read the works of Mary Wollstonecraft, then attending the opera with me will be easy. I insist, and there is no getting out of it." Chapter 7. Throughout the years Martha had been working as a governess at Welwick Hall. She'd managed to make friends with the upstairs servants. Whilst Maurice Barker, the butler, was a stickler for traditions, he also had a kindness in his heart that not everyone could see. One of her most valued friends was Mary, the housekeeper, and Martha was awaiting Mary's return to her room. She heard footsteps coming up the attic stairway, but it turned out to be 3 giggling maids. "Can we help you, Miss Martha?" one of them asked, and for a moment Martha believed they might be acting civilised towards her. She'd had cheek from some of the servants over the years, especially the ones who worked below. "Do you know if Miss Mary is almost done for the day?" she asked. "The missus is still busy," one brushed her off. My, aren't we the privileged ones to be getting the likes of the governess on our floor?" another remarked. Each of them threw her a sly glance as they entered a room together, leaving her alone. She didn't blame them. Her role often put her between the social classes. Many of the lower servants looked upon her as a middle-class woman trying to better herself, but that wasn't the case. At the other end of the spectrum, a governess could never be accepted as an upper-class member either. Footsteps sounded out again, but this time they were much quieter, and she breathed a sigh of relief as her friend came around the corner. "Martha, whatever's brought you up here?" the housekeeper asked. "Please, Mary, I'm in great need of solid advice, and there is no better person to ask than yourself," she pleaded. "Ah, lass, come into my room, why don't ye, and we can enjoy a light sherry," Mary offered, opening the door to her rooms. Miss Mary was not looked upon as a lower servant either, so she had the privilege of 2 rooms for her privacy. Her entrance room was arranged as a small parlour, and the other was her bedchamber. "Sit yourself down, Martha, and tell me what it is that's bothering you, while I pour us a glass of courage," Mary encouraged. "This must not go beyond you and I, Mary," Martha began. "Of course not. You know well that I'm not one to approve of gossip among the servants," Miss Mary assured her. "It is with regards to Mr. Harry," Martha said. "He has asked that I accompany him to the opera, and it seems to me that he will not take no as an answer." "Ah, I see," Miss Mary said, taking a seat in her favourite chair. "I thought he looked impressed with you. I could tell by his behaviour whenever I see the 2 of you together." "I have not encouraged anything. I can promise you that much," Martha said. banishing any ideas of impropriety. Miss Mary waved her arm to brush off the misunderstanding. "I know you haven't, lass, but there's no denying that you are a very attractive young lady, Martha. You just don't see it yourself. I have shown no favours with Mr. Harry, but—" "And the but is coming, is it?" Miss Mary said with a knowing tone. "You do not need to tell me anything more, Martha. I see no reason why you should not attend the Opera House. You are a genteel woman from an educated background, so you know what is expected of you. All that you should be worrying over is what to wear." "Oh, Mary, how did you know that I longed to say yes? You always make things sound so easy," Martha sighed. "As it happens, I do have a pretty dress that was given to me by a good friend at boarding school many years ago. Alas, it has been gathering dust at the back of my wardrobe." "Then tomorrow we shall take out that dress, have it cleaned and give it many new embellishments to bring it up to date," Miss Mary offered. "There now, problem solved. That means we can enjoy a second sherry and end our night with an interesting conversation. It's something I rarely get downstairs, so your company is very welcome." When Martha returned to her room, she took out the dress and sighed. It looked so dull and old. But Miss Mary was a woman of her word, and by the end of the next morning it had been washed and hung out to dry. In the afternoon, the housekeeper sent word for Miss Martha to join her in the smaller parlour room. To Martha's surprise, Lady Sarah was in there too. They were both busy sewing a pretty lace into the hemline of the dress that Martha was to wear for the Opera House. "Lady Sarah, you cannot be sewing my dress, surely," Martha exclaimed at finding the Duchess and Mary seated upon a settee together, working on the dress. "I can, and I will," Lady Sarah said with a genuine smile. "You shall go to the opera with my husband's cousin, and we will hear no more about it." But you of all people, Lady Sarah, you must understand why I hesitate," Martha said as she picked up a delicate ribbon strand that needed cutting and making into tiny bows. "This material is exquisite. Wherever did you find it, Mary?" "It has been donated by Lady Sarah," Miss Mary told her with a knowing grin. "I sought her advice because, like you, I didn't want you to upset anyone." "And I'm glad that Mary did come to me," Lady Sarah chirped in, not looking up from her needlework. "You are so very kind, Lady Sarah," Martha said, thanking the mistress of the house for her blessing. As Martha sat on the other settee to tie her bows, the door opened and Vera came running in. "Mother has released me to come and help," she said, curtsying to Lady Sarah. "Come and sit with me, child," Martha called over to her. "You can help me with these delicate bows. They'll be sewn into the lace that her ladyship and Miss Mary are adding to the dress." "It's all very exciting, Miss Martha," Vera said with a giggle. "Everyone in the kitchen is talking about how you are to attend an opera, but only because they're all jealous." "Perhaps one day you might attend the opera too, Vera," Lady Sarah said, looking over with a smile for the girl. "First, I would need to grow to be as beautiful as Miss Martha," Vera said, and Martha could see the girl's attention was elsewhere. "Concentrate on the bows, Vera," Martha whispered to her. "I don't want any wonky ones of my dress, do I now?" "Sorry, Miss Martha. I was imagining dancing at a ball in a gown as beautiful as this one will be." "Well, let's stay in the here and now," Martha said, chuckling at the girl's romantic dreams. The rest of the afternoon flew by with the dress finished and looking so much better. Dinner was served earlier that evening, and Martha ate hers on a tray in her room as she usually did. Occasionally she ate with the family if the Duke invited her. She tried eating with the servants in their dining room in the basement, but not all greeted her as kindly as the upstairs servants did. Some looked upon her with suspicion because of her wealthier background. It always surprised her how the servants knew so much about her life, but then they had ears all over the place. In the end, she chose to eat mostly in her room and quite enjoyed the solitude on occasion. Following dinner, she put on her dress as agreed and made her way to the small parlour where they'd made a dull dress into the perfect gown for the opera. There she met with Lady Sarah and Miss Mary, who inspected the gown to make sure Martha looked wonderful. "Harry will think you a pretty picture indeed, Miss Martha," Lady Sarah commented. Mary was about to say something when the door burst open and in came all three children. "Ah, here they are," Lady Sarah announced. "I asked them to come and give us their opinion because I know how much you value it." Martha smiled shyly, not used to being the centre of attention in such a way. "Oh, Miss Martha, You look like a princess from all the best storybooks, Vera said. I hope that I do go to an opera house one day, so I can dress up and look as pretty as you. Thank you for your kind words, Vera, Martha said. Well, in my opinion, Vera will look like a princess when she's grown up, no matter what she wears, Master Oscar declared. That is a very kind thing to say such sweet words, Oscar, Lady Sarah said, looking at her son with pride in her eyes. I could take Vera to the opera when we are both old enough, Master Oscar insisted. And you could help find her a gown, could you not, Mother? That is a long way away yet, my dear, Lady Sarah replied, though Martha could see worry in her ladyship's eyes. Everyone who loved the children knew that one day soon they would have to part, and Martha could see that it must bother Lady Sarah as much as it bothered her. She was such a gentle lady, but she too was forced by rules to send her son away to be educated with other boys of his own standing. For today, Martha brushed the thought away and did a twirl in her sensational dress. I thank you all for making an old gown look so pleasing, Martha announced. I must admit that I do feel like my old self once again. You have every right to enjoy the opera, Miss Martha, and I am only too pleased that Harry has invited you, Lady Sarah said as she went to stand up. I must go to my room now because I too am attending the opera house this evening, so I may see you there. Martha was flummoxed at that news and found no words to reply. She could not believe that she would be attending a social evening with Lady Sarah, and a worry started to niggle at the back of her mind. Bah! This is real life, Master Oscar. We are not in a girl's book of romance, young Silas said as soon as Lady Sarah had left the room. My sister will never be a princess, and I, for one, know that for sure. Now, children, Martha said, stopping the argument before it had a chance to even begin. None of us know what might happen in our lives, including you, Silas. Yes, we do, Silas snapped back, determined to have his say. I am fed up with these two pretending that they'll stay together forever. It's not going to happen, and we all know it. Martha could see that even the children were becoming aware of their impending separation. She was about to try and comfort Silas when his sister stepped in. I know that, Silas, but if we don't have hope and dreams, life will be so very dull, she told him, and he seemed to accept her soothing tone. It is time for you children to return to wherever you should be, Martha said in a firm voice, and thank you, Vera, your help was most welcome. As the children left to go their separate ways, Martha collapsed onto a settee. I'm a dreamer too, Miss Mary, she said to the housekeeper. I am still not sure that I'm doing the right thing. I know Lady Sarah is accepting of it, but will others make fun of me at the opera house? I will tell you what I know, young lady, Miss Mary said, her voice equally as stern Martha's had been earlier when she spoke to the children. You will blend in well with that dress, that no one will even notice you. Mr. Harry knows who you are, and still he has invited you to be with him. Let that be enough in itself for you to hold your head up high. You deserve to go to the opera, Miss Martha, as much as any of the other ladies that will be there. Thank you, Mary. I wish you could come along too, if only to calm my nerves, Martha said, hoping that once she was alone with Mr. Harry, she would feel better once she was alone with Mr. Harry. She would feel much better. Chapter 8. Harry was the perfect gentleman in the carriage ride to the opera house, complimenting her dress and sitting by her side. Martha's heart thudded at their closeness, feeling the warmth of his body as they almost touched. Being alone with him only added to her desires, and she imagined what she would do if he asked her for a kiss. He was treating her like she was a real lady of the ton, and she relished every moment. Why not, she thought. It's not every day a handsome man takes me to the opera to see The Marriage of Figaro. Once they arrived at the opera house, they entered a busy lobby, and the inside of the building was spectacular. Martha thought the decor of the opera house opulent as she looked around. Golden gilded scrolls wrapped around giant pillars. On the high ceilings were exquisite glass chandeliers where hundreds of candles had been lit, and heavy red velvet drapes hung over many doors, complemented with golden tassels. She felt as if she was visiting a palace where royalty might reside. For a brief moment, she felt a little intimidated by the lavish surroundings, on top of the fact that she'd never seen so many people together before. When Mr. Harry laid his hand on the small of her back to keep her close, it caused her spine to tingle at his touch. He led her through the crowd, his hand constantly touching her to guide her to their seats. His touch was reassuring, and as he greeted the many people whom he appeared acquainted with, she felt a sense of pride to be by his side. He led her toward the middle of the auditorium, telling her that this was the best viewpoint and the perfect spot to hear the acoustics of the opera. As everyone began to settle in their seats, the orchestra started to play. Martha felt herself completely relax as the harmonious instruments soothed her soul. She sneaked a glance at Mr. Harry, and he too was looking at her with the most charming of smiles. "This is so wonderful, Mr. Harry," she whispered, unable to hide her beaming grin. He leaned over and took hold of her gloved fingers. "That is all I wanted, to share with you the experience of an opera." As he let go of her hand, she wished they could have stayed like that the whole night, hand in hand, but she knew it would not do for him to be seen being familiar with her. The performers entered the stage, and soon her disappointment faded as their voices flooded the theatre. The stage was set with superb stage props, the costumes bright and wonderful, all helping Martha to immerse herself in the show. The pace soon picked up, and she became engrossed in the story as it unfolded in the tempo of the orchestra and the singing. It delighted her when applause rang out at certain points, and she joined in with great enthusiasm. Now and then she stole a glance at Mr. Harry, and every time he was looking at her too. The moments only served to add to the sheer delight of the evening. Martha felt so many emotions as she witnessed the opera play out on the stage. There had been romance, a battle, tragedy, and finally death, to which all the ladies were dabbing their eyes with handkerchiefs. When it came to an end, Martha felt a sense of disappointment, wishing the show could go on forever, but then she remembered the company that she was in, and her enthusiasm stirred again as she was loving every moment spent with Mr. Harry. It was time to leave their seats, and Mr. Harry kept her close as they pushed to make their way back through the crowds. At one point, he leaned in close to speak in her ear, and his warm breath tickled her neck. "These people, they all like to linger," he told her. "We should get a carriage straight away if we can get through the door." She nodded as he placed his hand on her arm to guide her, and the touch of his hand gave her confidence. This was all so perfect. The opera, being with Mr. Harry, the whole experience. Martha was so pleased that she'd allowed everyone to talk her into going to the opera with him. They were almost through the door when a deep voice called out, "Harry!" It caused Mr. Harry to pause, and as they both turned around, they could see it was the Duke looking their way. The Duchess was with him, but she was busy talking with some other women. The Duke pushed his way through the crowd to speak with Mr. Harry, but she had no idea what it was they were discussing, as she couldn't hear over the raucous noise. What she did notice was the burning glare that the Duke gave her, though she wasn't sure why. On the carriage drive home, Mr. Harry seemed to have something occupying his mind, and he was not at all chatty. "Have you been to many operas, Mr. Harry?" she asked, attempting to get him to speak. Martha so desperately wanted to talk about the show. "I have, Miss Martha," he said, keeping it brief. "What is fascinating is how I could not understand the language they sang in, yet I understood the story, and the entire plot line is conveyed upon the stage through music alone." She tried again, but he merely smiled and nodded back at her. The performance was totally engrossing. But still he did not speak, and so she spent the rest of the journey in silence, not wishing to disturb his thoughts. "I have a meeting with the Duke," he told her as they entered Welwick Hall through the main door. "I will say my good night to you, Miss Martha, and I thank you for your gracious company." With that he left, so she took herself straight to her room to calm herself after such an exciting evening. No doubt everyone would be asking her about her experience tomorrow, and she would be keen to share it. For now she wanted to be by herself. Martha couldn't help but worry that she'd upset Mr. Harry in some way. He'd been so subdued on the journey home. She was about to begin undressing when a knock came at the door. Opening it, she found Barker standing there. "Miss Martha, His Grace requests that you join him in his study," he told her. "What? At this late hour?" she asked the house butler, unsure that she'd heard him right. But the butler assured her that was the message, and so she straightened herself up again and set off towards the Duke's study. She recognised raised voices to be the Duke and Mr. Harry. As she neared the room, the words were clearer because the door was ajar. "You have always been a rake, Harry. You cannot deny it," Lord Spencer was saying, his voice edged with annoyance. "I had hoped that you might have grown out of using women the way you do. Well, it is one thing to partner yourself with a lady, but not with a servant. When you visit my home, I insist that you follow the rules of social etiquette." "I cannot understand why you feel so betrayed," Mr. Harry replied. "I can assure you that I mean well towards Miss Martha." Martha worried at the words. It seemed that Mr. Harry liked the company of women in general. She didn't wish to disturb them, but knew she had to make her presence known. "You cannot possibly mean well, Harry. Not with one of my servants. I will not have it. Do you hear?" Lord Spencer yelled. "She is well below your station, so I want any interests you might have in the woman to stop. It seems that your reputation for having a trail of mistresses has not changed one bit. But adding a servant to your long list is not happening in my home." Martha felt confused at what she was hearing. Mr. Harry had never seemed like a rake to her. He had always shown her kindness, using courteous mannerisms. Had it all been an act, if indeed the words of the Duke were true? Had she been duped into becoming his mistress? She had never once thought such a thing could happen. But now that she'd heard the truth, it was looking as if that was what Mr. Harry was looking for. She heard a clanking noise coming from the servants' stairway to the kitchen. Thinking that someone was coming, she decided she'd better move out of the hallway, so she knocked on the study door. "Enter!" Lord Spencer's voice called out. She did, and was greeted with a burning glare from the Duke. Mr. Harry could not even look her way. She assumed he was ashamed of either himself or of her. "Miss Martha, I do not believe how you dared to attend the opera house with my cousin. What have you to say for yourself?" Lord Spencer asked, his eyes boring into her. The Duchess agreed it was a good idea and— "It is a disgrace, and I forbid you to have any kind of relationship with a member of this family. Do you understand?" The Duke continued to yell as she remained standing in the doorway, though she had managed to close the door and dampen the noise. I do not know what it is that you mean, Your Grace," she stuttered, her body shaking as she felt lightheaded. "Mr. Harry took me to the opera as a thank you for helping him to find the rare scrolls. We are not in any kind of relationship, my lord." The Duke paused, his eyes burning with hatred for her, causing her to feel uneasy. "If I hear of you ever attempting to mingle with your betters again, in such a way, I shall dismiss you without any references. Do you hear me?" "I do, Your Grace, and I apologise if I have offended your family. I had no intention of doing so," she mumbled, her voice shaking with fear at the sudden attack. "No, Miss Martha," Mr. Harry intervened, his voice raised in anger too. "You have nothing to apologise for. It was I who invited you, and I alone should be the only one who my cousin is angry with. I do not even know why you had to send for Miss Martha, cousin. She has merely acted upon my influences." "Her acceptance of your invitation was wrong in every way, and she knows it," Lord Spencer spat back at Mr. Harry. "She is an intelligent woman and must take the blame for her wrongdoings. You can leave now, Miss Martha, but know that you remain on borrowed time." It was now Martha who dare not look Mr. Harry's way because she knew he was angry. The instructions to leave were most welcome, and Martha turned to dash from the room. Nor did she slow down when she was out of the study, as she practically ran back to her bedchamber. "What a fool I am," she called out as she closed the bedchamber door. "I should not have gone to the opera, and I knew it." Throwing herself onto the bed, she allowed the threatening tears to escape from her eyes. Burying her face into the pillow, she dampened the noise of her sobbing, feeling utterly defeated. The words of the Duke came to mind that Mr. Harry had a reputation for loose morals. No doubt he had planned to add her to his long list of conquests, yet surely a woman of her ranking would not be a conquest for him. If anything, it would cause terrible gossip among the gentry. It was all so confusing for her, and she had no idea what or who to believe anymore. With the knowledge that Mr. Harry's intentions were wrong in every way, she decided that she would not allow him near her anymore. Her position as a governess for Master Oscar was far more important than anything else in her life. She knew that her reputation was at stake, and she must never communicate with Mr. Harry again other than through her work. Certainly she must never be alone with him ever again. She had become so infatuated with him that it had made her blind. Reprimanding herself for such foolishness, she went to get undressed, doing so in the darkness. Martha didn't wish to get a glimpse of herself in the mirror, wearing the special gown, nor did she wish to see her tear-streaked face. Climbing into bed, she continued to sob, vowing that from tomorrow she would not engage with the Duke's cousin on any social level whatsoever. She could not afford to lose her position, and without any references that would be fatal to her future employment prospects. How would she ever work again if the Duke carried out his threat? All the pleasure from her evening at the opera house had gone. Now she felt only guilt and shame. She should never have agreed to it, and she knew it too. Chapter 9. The following morning, when Martha met with Master Oscar in the classroom, she prayed that Mr. Wald would not be visiting them. "You do not seem yourself today, Miss Martha. Are you unwell?" Master Oscar inquired, a look of concern in his eyes. "Was the opera not to your taste?" All thoughts of the opera gushed into her mind. She recalled how excited she'd felt to experience it all for the first time and being seated next to the handsome Mr. Wald. "Yes, he can be very charming when he wants to be," she thought to herself, not realizing that she'd drifted off into a daydream. "Miss Martha, Miss Martha," she heard a voice resonating in her head. "I say, was the opera that bad?" Master Oscar asked. "Oh no, it was wonderful," she replied with a distant smile. "Now then," she coughed, pulling herself together. "This morning we shall be going to the lake to paint. I have sent word to Cook to see if she might release Silas and Vera, but I cannot promise they will turn up. We will take an extra easel board each in case they do join us." "Excellent," Master Oscar sang out as they started to pack the painting equipment. "I was halfway through painting the pair of swans last time. This means I can finish it off today, I hope." Martha was only half listening to what he was saying, her mind filled with all the shameful feelings that the Duke had instilled in her with his angry outburst. Never before had she experienced such anguish, and it made her determined to avoid Mr. Wald at all costs. Her stomach had churned so much since that she hadn't been able to eat much in the way of breakfast that morning. Walking toward the river, Master Oscar chattered away, but Martha hardly said a word. She made it appear that she was listening on the outside, and for the most part she was, but all she could think about was Mr. Wald. She'd liked him so very much, but he'd deceived her. From what she understood, it seemed that Mr. Wald was a bit of a cad, and she'd most likely had a lucky escape from him. "But why, oh, why am I left feeling so very empty, as if I have lost him?" she asked herself as they arrived at the river, and she looked over the tranquil waters. "You are not yourself this day, if I may say so, Miss Martha," Master Oscar remarked. She was about to apologize when Vera's voice could be heard calling out, which drew his attention away from her, much to her relief. "I do not need the attention of any man," she tried to convince herself as she oversaw the children setting up their easels. "Lay out your previous canvas and continue from where you left off," she instructed them. "Choose your colours wisely. We are running a little low on some. I will need to go to market and replace them. Miss Martha, is it true what Master Oscar has told me, that the Duke shouted at you in his study last night?" Vera, always the bravest, was the only one who dared to bring it up. "Master Oscar must stop listening to house gossip," she answered, and felt a little annoyed at herself for sidestepping the truth. "How many times must I tell you, children?" "Father has no right to reprimand you, Miss Martha," Master Oscar pushed, unwilling to let it drop. "Mother said at breakfast that it was up to Mr. Harry who accompanied him to the opera house." "Yes, well, you are too young to be disagreeing with your father's instructions, Master Oscar," Miss Martha reprimanded, though she now worried that Mr. Wald's actions in taking her to the opera had caused a family rift. For the next hour the children settled into their lesson, and Martha found herself daydreaming again. She felt angry at herself that she couldn't shake Mr. Harry from her thoughts. What made her even angrier was that she'd fallen for his smooth words, believing she was worthy of his attention. The calling of the swans sounded out, breaking into her contemplations. "Ah, here comes Mr. Harry now," Vera called out, standing up to run and greet him. Vera's words set off alarm bells for Martha as panic set in. No, he can't be here. I can't possibly talk to him, her mind echoed. Right, children, time to pack up, she instructed, refusing to look at the man who the children were all laughing with. We must get in some poetry before your midday meal, she added. She knew that Mr. Wald wasn't interested in poetry and hoped it would put him off from joining them. Come along, collect your things and catch me up, she added, marching away with her easel and canvas tucked untidily under each of her arms. So determined was she to avoid Mr. Wald, at all costs, she left the children behind. When she arrived in the classroom, she threw her things on a table, panting at the rush of blood through her veins. This is all too much, she told herself, frustrated at not knowing what to do for the best. Following, not far behind her, the children arrived. They were busily chattering to one another, and Martha hurried them to put away their things. She felt a cold comfort that Mr. Wald had not followed them to the classroom, but knew that she'd done the right thing. I am returning to my chores if we are to do poetry, Silas announced. No, Silas, did I say poetry? Martha questioned, knowing she'd only suggested that topic to dissuade Mr. Wald from following them. This afternoon I've arranged for the horses to be saddled in the exercising corral. Master Oscar will take the lead, but I will still be on hand. The children jumped up and down in excitement, until after the midday meal they would go their separate ways so that Silas and Vera could finish their chores. She knew it unlikely that she would see Mr. Wald in the kitchen, so made her way there to collect her meal. Martha took the tray of food to her room so she could avoid everyone. As she closed her bedchamber door, she wasn't sure how much more of this she could take, and felt her eyes stinging as tears tried to escape. No, Martha Rose, you will not cry, she reprimanded herself, sitting in the window seat. You silly woman, she whispered. You cannot be in love with him. You have not known the man long enough. As she tried to comfort herself, she failed miserably. Martha knew the feelings she had for Mr. Wald were not anything she'd ever felt before. Whenever I'm in his company, my heart pounds, she thought, staring out of the window, and my legs are so weak that it feels like I will fall to the floor. If that isn't love, then what is? She nibbled on a piece of dry bread absent-mindedly as her thoughts raced around. It was soon time to return to the classroom, and she hoped that Mr. Wald wasn't there. Moving the children on as soon as they all arrived, she was keen to get outdoors and away from the possibility of his visit. Master Oscar mounted his horse first and began cantering around the corral, as he was more experienced than the others. Martha chose a piebald mare to ride and set her legs aside as a lady should, to encourage Vera to do the same. Though she was more used to straddling her legs astride as the men did, it gave one the means of riding faster, something she'd often done as a youngster. You sit well upon your horse, Vera, she remarked as they rode around the corral. It doesn't feel right, Miss Martha, Vera complained. Look how fast my brother can go. That will not be easy with my legs at the side of the horse. Learn to ride the way expected of a lady first. When you are proficient in this, you can learn the other method. But only use that option when you ride away from prying eyes, Martha advised, because she did the same herself. Not that she rode horses much these days, she didn't even own one, and couldn't request a horse from the stables other than for lessons. Lately she'd become more aware of her limited position. Had her father lived into old age, she would no doubt be a part of the elite mingling within their social circles. His death had left her distanced from the hierarchical world of the upper classes. As strong-willed as her aunt had been, she'd been too old to help Martha remain within the realms of the upper class. Her adult life had been an uneasy one, though not as hard as it was for the poor. Nonetheless, she was lonely. She surmised that was why she'd been so vulnerable to fall for a man who showed such interest in her as Mr. Wald had done. Her thoughts continued to tumble around like fallen leaves on a windy day. Very good, Silas, she called out to the young lad, who seemed like a natural upon a horse's back. But her thoughts continued to be hazy, even though she tried to concentrate on the children. A strange feeling came over Martha, and she felt as if she was being watched. Turning towards the house, she could see Mr. Wald in one of the upstairs windows. It was too far away to be certain he was looking at them, but Martha felt sure that he was. Was he watching her or observing the children in their riding lessons, but but what did she care? So long as he stayed away from her, then all was well, because she couldn't afford to risk her position as the governess of the Wald household. I mean nothing to him, she assumed, as it sounded like he was a philanderer and would most likely move on to some other woman.
Thank you for watching. Before we continue into the story, make us a favor. Hit the subscribe button. This way we will be able to create more audiobooks for free for you. Thank you again. Now, back to our story.
What did I mean to you, Mr. Harry? She whispered to herself as she looked back at him. Nothing, that is what. She spat under her breath. What was that, Miss Martha? Vera called out as her horse pulled up beside the governess. Nothing, Vera. I was singing to myself, nothing more, Martha lied. Nor did she care about her mistruth, because there was little she cared about now that her heart was broken. Yes, I do love him, she admitted to herself as Vera pulled away to trot around the corral once more. I do love you, she repeated softly, looking up at him. She could not see his features now, just enough to know it was him standing behind the glass. Pulling her horse away, she followed Vera around the corral, giving her encouragement in her lesson. She had to keep busy. She had to do things so that her mind would stop allowing Mr. Harry Wald into it. An hour later, it was time to return the horses to the stables. I am most impressed with your horse riding, both of you, she praised the twins. When you feel safer, we will race over the hills, Master Oscar promised. That is a long way off yet, young master, Martha said, smiling as they all walked back to the manor house. The twins went towards the back entrance to go and do their chores, while Martha and Master Oscar entered the front door. You have enough time to clean up and dress for the dining room, Master Oscar, she instructed the boy as they both ascended the stairs. Will you be joining us at dinner, Miss Martha? Master Oscar asked. The Duke has not requested my presence, so no, I will eat in my room, she replied. She was partly relieved, as it would have meant eating with Mr. Wald too. Was it not enough at her self-revelation that she was in love with the man, without having to spend time within proximity to him? The peace of her room felt welcoming, affording her time to think, without the constraints of the children in her care. It seemed that she'd gone through so many emotions since learning of Mr. Wald's rakish behaviour. She'd felt shocked at hearing the Duke accuse his cousin of being a rake, then devastation at the Duke's accusations and threats towards her. Last night in her bed, she'd wept at the loss of all her hopes in getting to know Mr. Wald. By the morning, she'd resigned herself to ignore him, hoping that he'd leave the manor house soon, and thus leave her life forever. But now she felt weepy again. It is true love that I feel for him, I am sure of it, she sobbed. I float on a cloud every time you pay me attention. You cause my heart to pound in my chest, and my legs feel like cook's jelly. For once in my life, I thought that I'd found a man who might love me back. But all you are is a rogue, Mr. Harry Wald, she said in a hushed tone, so that none would hear her speaking alone in her room. Nothing but a womanizer and Unable to think of any more insulting words to describe the man, she went to her bed that night with a heavy heart. Once again, she tossed and turned, and sleep would not come. Martha only hoped that when it did, her dreams might include a night at the opera with Mr. Harry. Chapter 10. Harry felt devastated. His cousin wouldn't listen. All he did was accuse him of being a womanizer, a cad, a rake. All of which he knew he had deserved some years ago, but the Duke was wrong. He had changed, and that had happened 4 years ago. Harry recalled when he fell head over heels for a banker's daughter. He devoted all his time to her because he had been so infatuated. He would only be seen at any social events with her by his side. Being with her had stopped his philandering days altogether. No more gambling at the gentlemen's clubs, no more drunken episodes, and all in the name of love. These days the memory of her was no longer painful, but she came to mind as he walked around the grounds to clear his head. After a year of courting, he'd finally plucked up the courage to ask for her hand in marriage. He'd wanted to surprise her, and so he went to visit his best friend from his college days. Harry had hoped he might have some ideas on how to present his proposal with some drama. Chuckling to himself, he remembered the horrified look on his so-called best friend's face. He couldn't recall who had been the more shocked as he'd barged into his friend's rented room, only to find him sleeping with his sweetheart, the very woman he was about to ask to become his wife. On that very day, his courting days ended. At the time, he'd believed it had broken his heart, though in truth he grieved more at the loss of his friend than for the woman. But he'd learned a valuable lesson. "The time I finally became a gentleman, and all because of Lady," he mumbled as he started to return to the manor house. From that day forward, he no longer took any woman for granted. In fact, he didn't socialize with anyone for at least a year. Never again did he wish to be hurt in such a way. It led to him avoiding social events and throwing himself into his interest in collecting antiquities. Arriving back, he found himself at the rear of the manor house and walked past the noisy open kitchen door. As he passed it by, Silas came running through the door with Vera not far behind him. "Mr. Harry!" they both called out together as if they had only one voice. "Children, how do you do?" he asked, pleased to see them as their cheery faces chased away his gloomy mood. "You look mighty miserable there, Mr. Harry," Silas piped up, a worried look on his brow. "Have the rumours not spread around yet?" Harry added. "You see before you a broken man, my friends." "Oh, Mr. Harry, there must be something you can do to get back in Miss Martha's good book," Vera questioned. "And if it helps, she's very miserable too." Harry didn't like to hear that Miss Martha was miserable, but it did give him hope that perhaps there was still a chance to win over her heart. "Now that you mention it, Vera, I wonder if my little loyal helpers would like to assist me in my quest for love?" Harry asked the children as an idea formed in his mind. "Yes, but we will need to get Master Oscar too," Vera said, looking thoughtful. "He'll wish to join us, so Silas will visit him and tell him." "What is it you have in mind, Mr. Harry?" Silas asked, looking thoughtful. "Do you have a task for each of us?" "Indeed I do, young Silas. Vera has just put an idea into my head. We are going to organise a game whereby Miss Martha will become our treasure hunter," Harry said. He knew the only way to get Miss Martha's attention was to include the children, plus it helped that he enjoyed their company. And their bags of energy had caused him to see that all was not lost yet. He was now all the more determined to see Miss Martha laugh again. "Meet me in the library in an hour, children, where I will reveal the plan," Harry said, as his idea was coming to fruition. "Inform Miss Martha that I wish to give you all a lesson on writing your own scrolls. That should get you out of your lesson." An hour later, his little loyal helpers arrived on time. "Sit around the table and we will execute our scheme," Harry told the 3 children, "where each of us must think up clues for a treasure hunt." "What is the treasure, Mr. Harry?" Master Oscar asked, not quite grasping the game. "We did not reveal much to Master Oscar," Vera said, "so that he could not give away our intentions, should Miss Martha ask him." "And did Miss Martha query about your lesson here?" Harry asked. "Not at all, why should she?" Master Oscar asked with a look of utter puzzlement on his brow. "Ah, Master Oscar, I am not to teach scriptures or literature this day," Harry explained, "but a far more important lesson you will learn from me today." "And that is?" Master Oscar continued his interrogation. "Is anyone going to tell me what we are about then?" "Dare I say it?" Silas was the one to respond. "But our lesson is about love." Harry watched as Master Oscar turned his attention to Vera, and he knew that the boy was smitten by his childhood friend. "Let us move on," Harry encouraged, "for we must put together the words expertly so that Miss Martha will follow our trail." It was Vera who questioned the game. "But how will we get her to do it? Miss Martha is not in much of a light mood these days. It's difficult to even get a smile from her." This news troubled Harry, and there you have the answer, little Miss Vera. For I have only ever seen Miss Martha when she smiles, and without her smile the world is a very dull place. We, dear children, are tasked with putting that smile back into Miss Martha's life. Vera blushed at Mr. Harry lending a title and praising her. It made her feel all grown up. "I will do anything to make Miss Martha laugh again," Master Oscar said. It was clear that he too was concerned for his governess. "Good, then let us begin," Harry said, feeling a slither of hope that by the end of the day he might have won over the love of the enchanting governess. "Each of us will do 2 clues, and I will create the first and the last." For the next hour or so, the library was buzzing with chatter, and by the end of their lesson, the children were sent out to set the stage. Master Oscar was tasked with launching the game. He was to hand the first clue to Miss Martha, and all they could do now was hope that she would play along. As Master Oscar returned to the classroom, the others went to their set destinations to plant their scrolls, each tied up with a red ribbon. Harry stood outside the classroom door, remaining out of sight, but listening in. "Miss Martha, we have been learning all about scrolls today. We decided to practice creating them," Master Oscar informed his governess. "My best of friends and I would like to invite you to hunt our scrolls, if you would be so kind. I am glad to see that you have all been put to work on a task." Miss Martha's soft voice floated through the open classroom door. As Harry listened, he wished he could burst into the room and embrace her there and then. But he had to be patient and pray that his plan would work. Remaining well hidden, he watched as Master Oscar led his governess towards the library, where she would be presented with a scroll. He moved to the open doorway of the library, observing her as she looked at the scroll. Smiling, she undid the red ribbon and unravelled it. Miss Martha read the clue out loud. "This is a room with a glass cabinet that has ancient secrets held within." There she paused, glancing over at the glass cabinet where, not long ago, she had stood in front of it with Mr. Harry. Would she recall that night, he wondered? That was the intention, to help guide her through all the places they had been together. Her eyes returned to the scroll, and Harry could tell from her expression that she was remembering their nights in the library together. "But now it is time for your aching belly to be filled with the food of love. Where next shall you find a clue?" Harry was delighted when a small smile appeared on Miss Martha's face. "Aching belly indeed," she chuckled. "Come along then, Master Oscar. To the dining room we go." Yes, it had worked, and Miss Martha was playing along. Harry has to be quick to get out of sight, only too pleased that she followed his trail. In the dining room she was to find another scroll. It would be on the chair where Harry was always seated. Again, he watched through the door that Master Oscar had left open on purpose. It didn't take her long to find the scroll, and the clue would lead her to the rose garden, where once they'd walked together with the children. Then she'd be led down to the lake, where she'd spurned him, following the Duke's threats. Each clue contained a subtle hint of a memory from their time together. All the clues were designed to stir her memories, leading her to the final scroll that held a big surprise. "The Opera House?" Miss Martha questioned as she read the scroll by the lake. "We cannot possibly go there, Master Oscar. We must end the game here." "Your carriage awaits, my lady," Master Oscar said, exactly as they had planned, "and within someone is to join us on our quest. One supposes that if you have all gone to such effort, then I must endure," Miss Martha agreed. She allowed Master Oscar to lead her to the courtyard, where a small open-topped carriage was waiting. As she approached the carriage, she could see Vera, who was already in the carriage waiting for them, though she was unaware that Harry was standing only a short distance away, where Miss Martha's voice would sing to him on the wind. "Ah, Vera, you have certainly brought cheer to this day for me," Miss Martha said. "All this chasing around is worthwhile, if only to see how well you have all done with your calligraphy writing on the scrolls. We knew how much you loved the Opera House, Miss Martha, so we had to include it in the trail." Vera repeated the line that she was to say, as if this were one of their Shakespeare plays. "And there you will find another of our troupe," Vera added. Harry mounted his saddled horse so that he could travel at speed and arrive at the Opera House before them. He needed to arrive there earlier, to arrange for the doorman to allow the children and Miss Martha entrance. The children were playing their parts well, ensuring the governess followed the trail of memories that only he and she shared. "Is she thinking of me?" he wondered as he galloped to the Opera House. Once there, he would hide out of sight as she searched for the final scroll. There was a hint that it lay upon the same seat she'd used before, but would she remember where they'd sat together? It had all been a risk, but if the ending was as successful as he hoped it would be, every step of the trail would have been worthwhile. As Miss Martha found the scroll, she also found Silas, who was sitting in the chair that Harry had taken that night at the opera. Miss Martha greeted him, and then she sat down in the seat by Silas's side. How did you children know that these were the exact seats Mr. Harry and I—" Her voice croaked, and she didn't finish. Instead, she reached for a lace handkerchief from the purse that she carried. "My apologies, children. You were not to know it would upset me," she sniffed. Harry once again felt that he wanted to reveal his presence and embrace her, but he knew he had to see it through to the end. The children had insisted upon it, as they had promised to keep Miss Martha on the trail. "Did you not have a good evening with Mr. Harry?" Master Oscar asked. "Oh yes, I had a wonderful evening," Miss Martha replied, pulling herself together in front of the children. "How much longer is this to last? I know it is only a coincidence, but your game is bringing back so many memories in my mind." "Are they good memories?" Vera asked. "Do not invade Miss Martha's thoughts, sister," Silas said. Harry was relieved to hear the boy coming to the rescue because none of them had planned on tears. "You have our word, Miss Martha. The next destination is the final one. Do you know where it is yet?" Reading the scroll, her face took on a look of surprise. "Why, yes, it is the basement of a bookshop," she said with surprise. "But it confuses me. All these places are special to me. But you are not to know that, so do not worry, children. Let us go to our last destination, shall we?" Harry knew how special every place had been. He had shared them with her. They'd been very clever with the wording, in the hope that she would feel the emotions of their time together. And so far, he was sure it had worked in his favour. Again he sped to the library, where he was to hide in the basement until Miss Martha had read the final scroll. Of course, he'd explained the event to the shop owner, who was delighted to join in their little game. They all arrived and the children chattered in excited voices. "This is the final treasure, Miss Martha," Vera said, showing much excitement in her tone. "Shh, Vera," Silas scolded her. "I must say I am very impressed at your efforts in creating the scrolls," Miss Martha said, a hint of delight at finding her final treasure. "Your game has been thoughtful, using places that I have visited. Very well, let me find the last one." It lay inside an old satchel, and from where Harry hid he watched her unfold it. Vera was to hold a candle lamp up close to the governess, so that Harry could read her face and know when to show himself. As Miss Martha read the words, Harry watched her eyes. Only he knew what the words were on the scroll because he'd refused to let the children read it, though he thought they might have guessed his deed. Miss Martha's looked shocked, and her eyes scanned the basement, no doubt looking for him. Harry obliged and stepped out in front of her. She looked at him and nodded her head, unable to speak. "And will you marry me, Miss Martha Rose?" he asked, repeating the words upon the scroll. "Or will you take my heart and crush it?" "Are you sure that you will risk the wrath of the Duke?" she asked, choking on her words. "Please say yes, and I will be the happiest man alive," Harry answered. As Miss Martha said yes, the children jumped up and down in delight, making so much noise that it brought the shopkeeper to the top of the cellar steps. Harry went to embrace his love and picked her up in his arms, squeezing her tightly because he never wanted to let her go. His scheme had worked, and Miss Martha had agreed to become his wife. Chapter 11. "No, Harry, this cannot be true," Lord Spencer questioned as his cousin broke the news of his marriage proposal to the governess. "You must not throw your life away like this." "Spencer," Lady Sarah called out in dismay, "how can you say such a thing? Miss Martha is a well-educated, respectable lady." "I can say it very easily because I am feeling partly responsible for Harry's future," Lord Spencer huffed at his wife. "The young man came here to find books and instead ended up marrying a servant. That is hardly a good find, is it?" Harry had put up with his cousin's misgivings over his relationship with Martha for too long, and now the time had come when he'd had enough. "As it happens, cousin, finding Miss Martha is far more priceless than any scroll or book I could have found," Harry spoke up in answer to his cousin's insult. Lady Sarah stood up, making sure she had her say before she left the room. "Harry is a grown man, old enough to decide what and whom he wants in his life. I, for one, hope that he and Miss Martha will be very happy together." With that sentiment, Lady Sarah marched out of the room. "Drat it, man," Lord Spencer said as he too went to stand up. "Why could you not have found a lady more suitable to your status?" "Because I do not care about status, cousin," Mr. Harry told him, keeping his tone firm, showing an air of confidence. "I only care for Miss Martha, and I love her so very, very much. Nothing you say could ever change that, and I will not be browbeaten into changing my mind." "Well, by Jove, man, do not expect me to be in attendance at your wedding, do you hear?" Lord Spencer warned. "Oh, somehow I do believe that you will be in attendance, cousin," Mr. Harry smirked, watching the Duke leave the room. "Once your pig-headedness has calmed itself," he called after the Duke. He could hear Lord Spencer mumble something, and in his heart he knew that his cousin would come around eventually. Lord Spencer Wald didn't have a hard heart, but he'd been raised to follow a strict set of rules all his life. It had mellowed him a little when he'd married Lady Sarah, but not completely. She, at least, had brought some reality into his life through her kind and gentle nature. Harry made his way up to the classroom, where he knew that Martha was informing the children of their union. He wanted to be a part of that conversation and dashed to get there in time. As he entered the classroom, a ruckus of cheers bellowed out. It was soon followed by the children running up to him, jumping up and down in delight. "I knew you would marry Miss Martha," Vera was the first to speak. "And I knew you would take no notice of father," Master Oscar laughed. "Bravo is all I have to say." "Well, it is romantic and all that, and I must admit I did enjoy the treasure hunt," Silas said. "We'll miss you both, though." Once they'd had their say, the children quietened down. Their joy was soon to be replaced by a more subdued feeling at the realization that they would both be leaving Welwick Hall. "Many changes are afoot, children," Harry said, soothing the way for what they all had ahead. "Master Oscar is to go to day school soon, for 2 days a week. But fear not, it is nearby, so he will be home at the end of the day. That will be until he begins at Eton, but that is still a few years away yet." "But it will not be the same without Master Oscar around," Silas complained. "It is only for a couple of days during the week, Silas," Miss Martha explained. "He is also to have a new tutor who will visit Welwick Hall. He will be with you for the next couple of years and will continue to teach Vera and Silas too for every lesson. It has all been agreed with the Duke and Duchess. Besides, I will still be around for a few more weeks yet, until the wedding." "But the new tutor will not be you, Miss Martha," Vera mumbled. "No, but I have met with him, and I promise you that he is very kind indeed," Miss Martha assured the children. "I have always taught you that as you grow up, your lives will take many twists and turns, and you must accept those changes." "Where will you live, Miss Martha?" Vera asked, looking fretful. "Mr. Harry has a very pleasant house in Cambridge. When we are married, I will move there. It is a good-size house, and there will be room enough for you all to visit on occasion," Miss Martha explained. "Now come along and help me to take Mr. Harry's last few bags down to the carriage." The time had arrived for Harry to leave. In a few weeks he would marry Miss Martha in a church near his home in Cambridge. Whilst it would only be a few more weeks, he knew that he'd miss his fiancée so very much. Then again, they would be together very soon, and after that for the rest of their lives. The children followed them to the carriage, where Miss Martha was doing well at holding back her tears. "I want to thank each one of you," Mr. Harry told the children, as he hugged each of them. "You have all played a part in allowing Miss Martha to see how much I love her. As you grow up, I know that every one of you will one day be as happy as I am today. I do believe that to be so because you have a valuable friendship between you. Time can only help to strengthen your bonds. Goodbye, children, and I will see you all at the wedding." Harry knew that it would be wrenching for Miss Martha to leave the children. He'd not been there long and was finding it difficult too. Their lives were changing as they matured, and soon their governess would have had to leave anyway. Better that Miss Martha leave them now to join him, because he was going to love her with all his heart. Before he entered the carriage, he could see tears on Miss Martha's cheeks, and he went to comfort her before he left, hugging her with a strong arm. "Come, my love, you will journey to me in only a few weeks. It will be the beginning of our togetherness through life," he said, kissing her head of hair and stroking her soft cheek. "I love you so very much, and I intend of taking care of you forever." "And I you, my love," she replied in a soft voice, leaning into his chest. "We are to have such an adventure together, travelling the world in search of my antiquities," he told her, and with you by my side, I could ask for no more from life." Finally, he climbed into the carriage and the driver moved off. Taking one last look at the children and his one true love, he had learned a great lesson in his short time at Welwick Hall: how to love. Any sadness was immediately dissolved with the knowledge that he and Martha would soon be together again, only this time forever. Epilogue. A few months later, as Mr. Harry and Mrs. Martha Wald climbed from their carriage, they were soon surrounded by 3 excited children. "Oh, Miss Martha, it is so very, very good to see you again," Vera said, enjoying a hug from her ex-teacher. "Miss Martha is not addressed Miss Martha any longer. She is, Silas began to tell his sister, but it appeared that even he was unsure. "You can call Miss Martha for as long you like, young Silas," Martha laughed. "I see that your observant nature never changes. You are still reprimanding your sister at every opportunity." "I'm glad that someone knows how he behaves, Miss Martha," Vera said, giving her brother a blazing stare. "The older he gets, the worse he becomes." Martha didn't reply. She wanted no part of the children's differences, so she smiled in deference. "Master Oscar, my boy, how are you?" Mr. Harry asked, as went to shake the boy's hand. "I am very well, Mr. Harry," Master Oscar replied with a happy grin at seeing his old classroom teacher and her husband. "I understand you will be starting at Eton School soon, Master Oscar?" Martha asked as she looked up at the boy. My, how you have all grown, and it has only been a few months since we last saw you." "I am, Miss Martha. I only wish that Silas could come with me," Master Oscar said, not looking happy about the prospect of leaving his friends behind. "I will miss the twins so very much." "Well, put that behind you for now. Let us enjoy the festive season that lays ahead," Martha suggested, but she understood how he must feel. When she had left Welwick House to marry, she too had missed everyone she'd left behind, and now they were all growing up without her. "I find the festive season so exciting, Miss Martha. The annual ball for Christmas is one of my favourite times of the year," Vera said, a twinkle shining in her happy eyes. "You would not believe the delicious smells coming from the kitchen, and Mother is training me too. I am an undercook already." Martha noted the look on Master Oscar's face. He'd never liked that his best friends, the twins, were in servitude. "If you are anything like your mother, you will make a fine cook for Welwick Hall," Martha praised the girl. "We must be going and return to our chores," Silas said, always the one who hated to linger for long, in fear of being caught. "It is good to see you again, Miss Martha and Mr. Harry." "Very well, young Silas, but do try to have some fun over the festive season," Martha reminded him, giving him a quick hug too. The twins ran off to return to their work, and Master Oscar led the couple inside, through the front door of Welwick Hall. There they were greeted by the Duke of Cornwall, Harry's distant cousin. "I say, you two, how very good of you to travel all this way for our annual ball," Lord Spencer said in greeting to Harry and his wife. While he'd not approved of their marriage, his Grace had softened a little to it. It seemed he'd learned to accept Martha into the family. On her part, she'd made the most of his offer to visit so that she could see the children. It pleased her that the Duke had allowed the twins to continue their education. In her eyes, she believed that it would help them as adults to find a better life for themselves, away from servitude. Within moments of being greeted by the Duke, the Duchess joined them as she descended the stairway. After greeting them, she led them into a parlour room for tea and cakes. "You two must be famished after your tiring journey?" Lady Sarah questioned, smiling at their company. "Well, I am thirsty, so tea will be most welcome, my lady," Martha said, following close behind her husband. It was the time of the big annual Christmas ball that the Duchess liked to host on Christmas Eve. The first time they'd attended a ball together, Martha had been very nervous, and Harry had stayed by her side every moment of the night. He was a supportive and wonderful husband, and she could not be happier. This time she felt more confident to mingle among the elite and enjoy herself without shadowing him. First, though, she would gather the children and give them each a gift. It wasn't until after dinner that Martha asked Master Oscar if he could send word for Vera and Silas to meet them in the library. When the twins arrived, it felt like old times. The four of them had often sat in the library to read out loud the roles from plays, mostly those written by Shakespeare. "Sit down, all of you, for I would like to give each of you a small gift," she instructed them. "I am glad to see that are you all still a rowdy bunch." "But we do not have a gift for you, Miss Martha," Vera said, looking a little disappointed. "I'm only too pleased to see each one of you. That is the best gift I could have," Martha assured them. "The first one is for Vera. Here you go, my dear," Martha said, passing a flat box shape to the girl. Martha had decided to hand one gift out at a time so they could watch each other and enjoy one another's excitement. "Oh, Miss Martha, it is beautiful," Vera declared as she lifted the lid from a box to reveal an exquisite pink dress. "I had the servants' ball in mind. Do you like it?" Martha asked. But she knew Vera's tastes, so she felt quite confident the girl would be happy with her choice. "I love it, Miss Martha, and I am to play the pianoforte too, as you said I would," Vera sang out, standing up to place the dress flat against her body. "Master Oscar will be in attendance and has promised me a dance. This dress will be so very, very perfect." "Well, that is one of us happy," Martha said, smiling at Vera doing twirls while she held the dancing dress against her. "Silas, you can be next," she said, handing him a large square-shaped box. To open it, he stood up and took the lid from the box to look down into it. Martha was pleased to see his eyes light up as he looked inside the box. Silas pulled out an ornamental globe of the world. Martha knew that they had one in the classroom, but Silas had always been so fascinated by it. "I have a feeling that one day you might travel the world," Martha laughed, "and now you can plan out all your routes before you embark upon your adventures." "I don't know about that, Miss Martha, but it is a wonderful gift, thank you," Silas said, a huge grin lighting up his face. "And for you, Master Oscar, the smallest gift, but still one for you to treasure," she said, handing it to him. Master Oscar unwrapped a new copy of The 12th Night, a play he and Vera had always enjoyed. "You can keep it in the library," Martha chuckled, "because I happen to know that the other copy is so old and worn with all the times you and Vera forced us to read it." "Yes, it will be safer in the library," Master Oscar said, getting up to find a place for it on the library shelves. "It will sit right here, and then any of us can read it when we feel down. We can recall our childhood memories and think about the many times we were together in here." The library door opened, and Harry walked in, a tray of hot milk and biscuits in his hands. Each of them showed him their gifts, and they all enjoyed a night of chatter as they came together once again. Martha watched the children, and it made her feel so happy to be with them. Life was changing at a fast pace, and she wished only to make the most of their childhood, which was almost at an end. The end. Read now Oscar's and Vera's story at Vera at the Ballroom.
Scan the QR code or click on the link in the description to read the next book in the series. Share this video with your friend or watch on of the following videos. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to not miss any new audiobooks. Thank you for watching.